The crystal water glass hit the white tablecloth with a crack that made every head in the restaurant turn. Ethan Vale didn't flinch. Across from him, Victor Hale slid a document forward with one manicured finger, his smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Sign it tonight, or there's no wedding." Marina sat frozen between them, her engagement ring catching the light like a trapped star. What Victor didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the empire he was using as a weapon already belonged to the man he was trying to break. If you want to see how this power play unfolds, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The thing about Chicago in October is that it pretends to be civilized. The leaves turn colors that belong in paintings. The wind off the lake smells clean instead of industrial. And places like Aurelius, the kind of restaurant where a single appetizer costs what some families spend on groceries, glow with warm light that makes everyone inside look like they belong in a better version of their own lives. Ethan Vale had been coming to Aurelius for 5 years, always the same corner table, always with a reservation that materialized even when the place was supposedly booked solid for months. Money did that. Money, and the kind of quiet influence that didn't need to announce itself. Tonight, though, he wished he'd picked anywhere else. "More wine, Mr. Vale?" The waiter appeared at his elbow with practiced invisibility, the kind of service that cost extra even when you weren't paying attention. "No, thank you." Ethan's voice came out tighter than he intended. Across the table, Marina gave him a look, not quite worry, not quite warning, something in between that made his chest hurt. She was wearing the blue dress. The one he'd told her made her eyes look like they held entire oceans. She'd laughed at him when he said it, called him ridiculous, then wore it anyway because Marina Wells didn't do anything she didn't want to do. That's what he loved about her. That's what had gotten them both into this mess. "He's late." Victor Hale's voice cut through the ambient noise like a knife through silk. He hadn't bothered to lower his volume the way people usually did in expensive restaurants. Victor didn't adjust for his environment. He expected his environment to adjust for him. "Traffic," Marina said quietly. Her hand rested on the table near her water glass, fingers drumming a nervous pattern that Ethan had learned to recognize. 1, 2, 3. Pause. 1, 2, 3. Like she was counting her way through something difficult. In Chicago? Shocking. Victor's sarcasm landed heavy. He was a big man, not fat, but substantial in a way that took up more space than his actual body required. Gray hair swept back from a face that probably looked distinguished in board meetings and intimidating everywhere else. Right now, under the carefully designed lighting of Aurelius, he looked like exactly what he was, a man used to winning. Ethan checked his phone. Nothing from James, his lawyer, nothing from Rachel at the office, just a text from his daughter's nanny confirming that Sophie was asleep, dreaming whatever 6-year-olds dreamed about. Probably horses. Sophie was on a horse phase that showed no signs of ending. "Put that away." Victor didn't quite snap it, but close enough. "We're having dinner as a family. Act like it matters." Marina's fingers stopped drumming. Ethan watched her pull her hand back into her lap, watched the small muscles in her jaw tighten. He wanted to reach across the table, take her hand, remind her that in 2 weeks none of this would matter, because they'd be married, and Victor's opinion would be just noise they could choose not to hear. But he didn't reach for her, because they both knew that wasn't true. Victor's opinion would matter for as long as Marina let it matter, and Marina had spent 30 years learning to let it matter very much. "I apologize," Ethan said, sliding his phone into his jacket pocket. "You're right. I'm here. Are you?" Victor leaned back in his chair, studying Ethan with eyes that had probably made junior executives sweat during performance reviews. "Because from where I'm sitting, you've been somewhere else all evening, distracted, nervous maybe." "I'm not nervous." "No? 2 weeks from your wedding and you're calm as a lake?" Victor's smile didn't reach anywhere near his eyes. "Either you're lying or you don't care enough about what's happening. Not sure which is worse." Marina's water glass made a small sound as she set it down too hard. "Dad, please." "I'm just making conversation, sweetheart. Getting to know my future son-in-law. That's what this dinner is for, isn't it? Building bridges. Creating understanding." He picked up his wine, a Bordeaux that probably cost more than most people's car payments, and took a slow sip. "Speaking of which, I brought something we need to discuss." Ethan felt the shift in the air before he saw Victor reach for the leather portfolio that had been sitting beside his chair. Marina felt it too. Her whole body went still in a way that reminded Ethan of rabbits he'd seen in his mother's garden when he was a kid, frozen in the moment before they decided whether to run. "Not here," Marina said. Her voice barely made it across the table. "Dad, we agreed. Not tonight. We agreed to have dinner. We're having dinner." Victor pulled a thick document from the portfolio, pages bound with one of those blue backing sheets that lawyers loved. "We're also having a conversation that's 2 months overdue." The restaurant hummed around them. Somewhere across the room, someone laughed, bright and careless, the sound of people who weren't about to have their evening destroyed. A couple at the next table was celebrating an anniversary. Ethan had heard them tell the waiter, watched the man reach across to hold his wife's hand with the kind of casual affection that came from decades together. He wanted that. Decades with Marina. Mornings where Sophie called her mom, without the careful pause she still put before the word. A life that didn't feel like negotiation. Victor slid the document across the white tablecloth. It moved smooth and inevitable, like a piece in a game Ethan hadn't agreed to play. "Prenuptial agreement," Victor said, like he was announcing the weather. "Standard protection for both parties. My lawyers drew it up. Very fair, very straightforward. You sign tonight, we move forward. You don't sign." He let the sentence hang there, suspended in the expensive air between them. Ethan didn't touch the document, didn't even look at it. He kept his eyes on Victor's face, reading the calculation there, the absolute certainty that this was a fight already won. "We talked about this," Marina said. Her voice had gone thin, stretched tight over something that might have been anger or might have been fear. Probably both. "You said you'd let it go. You promised. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it." Victor's tone suggested this was perfectly reasonable, that he was the only one being rational while everyone else got emotional. "Marina, sweetheart, you have to understand. This isn't personal. It's protection, for the family, for the company, for you. For me." Marina repeated it like the words tasted wrong. "How is this for me? Because you've worked hard to get where you are. You've earned your place in this family, in society. You've made something of yourself." Victor leaned forward, his voice dropping to something that probably thought it sounded gentle. "I'm not going to let some opportunist take that away from you." The word hung there. Opportunist. Ethan watched it land, watched Marina flinch like she'd been slapped. "Don't," Ethan said quietly. Not to Victor, to Marina, because he could see her gearing up to defend him, to fight a battle that would only make this worse. "It's fine." "It's not fine." Marina's hands were flat on the table now, pressed down like she was trying to hold something in place. "This is insulting. This is necessary." Victor cut her off with the kind of authority that came from years of running boardrooms. "Look, I understand, young love. I remember what it feels like to think nothing else matters. But Marina, you're not a child anymore. You're about to marry a man with a daughter, a man who appeared in your life less than a year ago, a man who, let's be honest, stands to gain quite a bit from this union." Ethan felt the attention shifting toward their table. Not obvious. People in places like Aurelius were too practiced at pretending not to notice drama, but he caught the sidelong glances, the slight turn of heads. This was what Victor wanted: public pressure, social weight. "I have my own money," Ethan said. His voice stayed level through effort. "I don't need yours." "Everyone needs money. It's just a question of how much." Victor picked up the wine bottle, topped off his glass like they were discussing stock portfolios instead of dismantling Ethan's engagement. "You run an investment firm, small operation from what I understand. Boutique, which is a nice way of saying you're struggling to compete with the real players. We're selective. You're broke." Victor said it with a smile like he was being funny. "Or close enough. Which is fine, admirable even. Building something from nothing, very American dream. But let's not pretend you're marrying my daughter from a position of strength." Marina's chair scraped against the floor as she started to stand. Ethan caught her eye, shook his head once. She stayed seated but looked like it took everything she had. "The prenup is simple," Victor continued. He tapped the document with one finger, a rhythmic sound that felt like a clock counting down. You get nothing from the family assets, nothing from Hale Corporation, nothing from the trust funds or the property or the investments. You marry Marina as she is now, which I'm sure is all you want, right? And if things don't work out, you leave with exactly what you brought in. And if I don't sign? Victor's smile widened. Then I cancel the wedding. The water glass hitting the tablecloth made that sharp crack that killed all other sound in the room. Not broken, but close. Marina had grabbed it without meaning to, set it down hard enough that water sloshed over the rim and spread across the white fabric in a dark stain. "You can't do that!" Her voice came out strangled. "You don't have the right." "For a seat. I'm paying for it, sweetheart. The venue, the caterer, the flowers, the band, the photographer. Every single piece of your wedding day is on my credit card. So yes, I can cancel it. And I will if this man doesn't have enough respect for you to sign a simple document protecting your interests." "My interests?" Marina's laugh came out broken. "Since when do you care about my interests?" "Since always." Victor's face shifted into something that might have looked like hurt on someone who practiced being vulnerable. On him, it just looked strategic. "Everything I've done has been for you, taking you in when you had nothing, giving you opportunities, education, a life. Do you think any of that was easy? Do you think bringing a poor girl into our world didn't cost me, socially, professionally?" Ethan watched Marina absorb the blow, watched her shrink just slightly, the way she always did when Victor reminded her where she came from. Poor girl. Like it was her original sin, the thing she could never quite wash off no matter how well she dressed, or how perfectly she learned to navigate the world Victor had pulled her into. "That's enough," Ethan said. "Is it?" Victor turned his full attention to Ethan for the first time since the document appeared. "You want to marry her? Prove it. Prove you're not just after the name, the connections, the doors that open when you're a Hale instead of a, what was it, Vale? Where's that from anyway? England, Ireland, Cleveland. Cleveland." Victor repeated it like it confirmed something. "Right. So you come from nothing, she comes from nothing, and somehow you two find each other in the middle of Chicago high society. What a coincidence. What a lovely story." "We met at a charity auction." Marina's voice had gone flat, reciting facts like they were evidence in a trial. "For children's literacy. Ethan was bidding on the same art piece I wanted. He let me have it. How gallant." Victor's sarcasm could have stripped paint. "And then what? You started talking? Discovered you had so much in common? Two people from nowhere, both trying to climb the same ladder?" "We fell in love," Marina said. "That's what happened. Is that so hard to believe? Love." Victor set down his wine glass with exaggerated care. "Sweetheart, I'm not saying love isn't real. I'm saying it's not enough. Not in our world. In our world, you need protection. You need guarantees. You need control." Ethan interrupted him. "That's what you need. Not guarantees, control." The silence that followed felt like a physical thing. Victor stared at Ethan with eyes that had probably ended careers, dissolved partnerships, turned allies into enemies. Ethan stared back and thought about Sophie, about the way she'd looked at Marina the first time they met, like someone had given her the mother she'd been asking about for 3 years. He thought about Marina's hands in his, the way she fit against him when they danced, the sound of her laugh when she forgot to be careful. And he thought about the folder in his office safe, the one Victor didn't know about, the one that changed everything. "I'm trying to protect my daughter," Victor said slowly, enunciating each word like Ethan might be too stupid to understand. "That's what fathers do. They protect. You have a daughter. You should understand that." "I do understand. That's why I'm not going to sign." Marina's head snapped toward him. Victor's expression went from calculated anger to genuine surprise. "Excuse me? I'm not signing your prenup." Ethan kept his voice quiet, conversational. Around them, the restaurant had gone back to pretending they didn't exist, but he could feel the attention still there, coiled and waiting. "Because it's not about protection. It's about keeping Marina under your control, and I won't help you do that." "Then there's no wedding." Victor said it flat, final, a door slamming shut. "Dad?" Marina started. "No." Victor held up one hand, silencing her with the gesture. "I've been more than patient, more than generous. I've accepted this relationship even though every instinct told me it was wrong. I funded your wedding, welcomed this man into our family events, smiled for the cameras. But I will not stand by and watch you throw away everything we've built because you think you're in love with someone who's clearly using you. He's not using me. Then why won't he sign? Victor pushed the document closer to Ethan. If he loves you so much, if this is all real, what does he have to lose? Unless he's planning on it not working out. Unless he's already thinking about the divorce, about the settlement, about walking away with a piece of what you've earned. I didn't earn anything, Marina said. Her voice had dropped so low, Ethan almost didn't hear it. You've made that very clear over the years. Everything I have is because you gave it to me. Poor Marina. Lucky Marina. Marina who came from nothing and should be grateful for everything. That's not what It's exactly what you meant. She stood up this time, and Ethan didn't stop her. Every time you remind me where I came from, every time you tell people how you saved me, every time you use my past like a weapon to keep me in line. Victor's face went red. I gave you a life, a real life. Do you remember what you were before I took you in? Do you remember that apartment, that school, the future you were looking at? I remember. Marina's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs, trying to hide it. I remember all of it, and I'm grateful. I've been grateful my whole life. But I'm done being so grateful that I let you run every decision I make. This isn't about gratitude. This is about intelligence, basic common sense. Victor gestured at Ethan like he was Exhibit A in a trial. This man has nothing. He brings nothing to this marriage except a child and debt and... Stop! Marina's voice cracked on the word. Just stop. You don't know anything about him. You've never tried to know anything about him. You made up your mind the first time I brought him to dinner, and nothing I've said or done has changed it. Because nothing you've said or done has given me reason to change it. Victor was standing now too, his voice rising above the careful murmur of the restaurant. Show me I'm wrong, Marina. Show me one piece of evidence that this man is what he says he is. That he's not just another person trying to use you to get ahead. Ethan stood slowly. His napkin dropped to his chair. He buttoned his jacket with deliberate care, giving himself time to think, to breathe, to remember that losing his temper now would only prove Victor right. Marina, he said quietly, let's go. You're leaving? Victor looked between them like he couldn't believe his script was being ignored. We're not finished here. Yes, we are. Ethan pulled out his wallet, extracted $500 bills, and set them on the table. Probably twice what the meal cost, but he didn't care. Dinner's on me. Consider it my contribution to family bonding. Sit down. Victor's voice dropped into command mode, the tone that probably made executives scramble during meetings. We're going to finish this conversation like adults. No, Ethan said. We're not. Because this isn't a conversation. It's an ambush, and I'm not interested in participating. He moved around the table to Marina's side, offered his hand. She took it, her fingers cold despite the warmth of the restaurant. Her eyes were wet, but she hadn't let herself cry. Not yet. Not in front of Victor. If you walk out that door, Victor said, his voice carrying across the room now, uncaring about who heard. The wedding is canceled. All of it. The venue, the flowers, the invitations that have already gone out. I'll pull every piece of it, and everyone will know why. Everyone will know you couldn't commit to protecting my daughter. That you wanted access to her money more than you wanted her. Marina made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Ethan squeezed her hand. Do what you need to do, he said to Victor. We'll figure out our own wedding. With what money? Victor's laugh was ugly. You can barely keep your office open. You think you can afford the kind of wedding she deserves? The kind she's been planning for months? I don't care about the wedding, Marina said. Her voice came out stronger than Ethan expected. I care about marrying him. The rest is just what you've dreamed about since you were a little girl. Victor's expression softened slightly, shifting into something that looked almost like genuine emotion. Sweetheart, I know you. I raised you. I know how much this day means to you. Don't throw it away because you're angry with me. Don't make decisions you'll regret. The only thing I regret, Marina said slowly, is not standing up to you sooner. She turned toward the door. Ethan followed, his hand still holding hers. Behind them, Victor called out something else. Another threat, another manipulation. But Ethan stopped listening. He focused on walking, on keeping Marina steady as they crossed the restaurant floor, past tables full of people who were definitely watching now, past the hostess stand where a young woman stared at them with wide eyes, past the glass doors and out into the Chicago night. The October air hit cold after the warmth of Aurelius. Marina sucked in a breath that sounded painful, then another. Her hand was still in Ethan's, gripping tight enough to hurt. "I can't believe he did that," she said. "I can't believe, in front of everyone." He wanted an audience. Ethan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her as she finally let herself shake. Pressure, social proof. Make it harder for us to say no. "I hate him." The words came out muffled against Ethan's chest. "I hate that he still does this to me. I'm 30 years old and he still treats me like I'm a child who can't make her own decisions." "I know. And the worst part is, he's right about some of it. The wedding, I did want that wedding. The venue with the gardens, the string quartet, all of it. I've been planning it since I was 15 and it's stupid, but I wanted—" "It's not stupid," Ethan said. "And you'll have it. Maybe not that exact venue, maybe not with his money, but you'll have the wedding you want." Marina pulled back to look at him. Her mascara had run slightly at the corners of her eyes, giving her a bruised look that made Ethan's chest ache. "How?" "He's right about your firm. I know it's struggling, I know." "Stop." Ethan wiped at her cheek with his thumb, catching the smudge of makeup. "Let me worry about the money. You just worry about whether you still want to marry me after watching that disaster." "Of course I want to marry you. That's not—" She stopped, studied his face in the streetlight. "You're not surprised." "What?" "By any of this, the prenup, the threats, the public scene? You're not surprised." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Did you know he was going to do this?" Ethan hesitated. "I suspected." "How?" "Because I know men like Victor. They don't give up control easily, and they especially don't give it up without a fight." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, buying time. "I just didn't think he'd do it quite like that." "What do we do now?" The question sat between them, heavy with implications, because Ethan knew what came next. The conversation he'd been avoiding, the revelation that would either fix everything or destroy what they had. The folder in his office safe. But not tonight, not while Marina was still shaking from her father's attack, not while she was vulnerable and hurt and looking at him like he was the only solid thing in her world. "Now," he said, "we go home. We check on Sophie. We have some extremely expensive wine that I've been saving for a special occasion. And we remember that in 2 weeks, none of this matters because we'll be married and Victor's opinion becomes just noise. What if he really cancels the wedding? Then we get married at City Hall with Sophie as our flower girl, and we have the best wedding ever because it's ours and we chose it." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "I mean it, Marina. I don't care about the venue or the flowers or the string quartet. I care about marrying you. The rest is just theater." She nodded against him, not quite convinced but wanting to be. "Okay. Okay? Okay." She took a deep breath, let it out slowly. "Let's go home." They walked to where Ethan had parked his car, a Tesla that was nice but not ostentatious, the kind of vehicle a successful but not wealthy person might drive. Victor had made comments about it before, snide little observations about how a real success story would drive something with more presence. Ethan unlocked the doors and helped Marina in, then walked around to the driver's side. As he slid behind the wheel, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. That was quite a show. Looking forward to the next act. He deleted it without responding and started the car. The drive back to his townhouse took 20 minutes through traffic that was light for Chicago. Marina was quiet, staring out the window at the city sliding past. Ethan let her have the silence. Sometimes the best thing you could do was just be present, not try to fix everything with words that wouldn't help anyway. His phone buzzed twice more during the drive. He ignored it both times. They were 3 blocks from home when Marina finally spoke. "Did you mean it? About not caring about the wedding?" "I meant it. Because I care. I know I shouldn't. I know it's just one day and what matters is the marriage, not the ceremony. But I do care. I've imagined it so many times and—" "Then we'll make it happen," Ethan said. "Whatever you want. However you want it. We'll figure it out." "With what money?" The question again. The one that would lead to the conversation he wasn't ready to have. Ethan pulled into his driveway, killed the engine, and turned to face her. Marina, do you trust me? Of course. Then trust that I'll take care of this. Trust that I have resources Victor doesn't know about. Trust that when I say we'll have your wedding, I mean it. She studied him in the dim light from the dashboard. What aren't you telling me? A lot of things. He tried to smile. But nothing that changes how I feel about you. Nothing that makes this less real. That's not reassuring. I know, and I'm sorry, but I'm asking you to trust me for 2 more weeks. Can you do that? Marina was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. 2 weeks. But then you tell me everything. Whatever you're hiding, whatever secrets you're keeping, I want to know all of it. Deal. They got out of the car and walked up to the front door together. Ethan's townhouse was nice, not mansion nice, not Victor Hale nice, but comfortable. 3 bedrooms, renovated kitchen, a backyard big enough for Sophie to play in. The kind of place a moderately successful person might own. The kind of place a man worth nearly $4 billion might live if he wanted people to think he was struggling. Inside, the house was quiet. Mrs. Chen, Sophie's nanny, looked up from the couch where she'd been reading. She went down about an hour ago. No problems. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. Ethan walked her to the door, paid her for the evening, watched her drive away in the sensible Honda she'd owned for a decade. When he came back to the living room, Marina was already halfway up the stairs. I'm going to check on Sophie. Ethan nodded and headed to his office. The room was small, just enough space for a desk and a filing cabinet, and the safe built into the wall behind a painting that Sophie had made in kindergarten. He opened the safe with fingers that didn't quite want to cooperate, pulled out the folder he'd been carrying around like a secret for 6 months. Inside, documents that would make Victor Hale choke on his expensive wine, proof of ownership, chains of acquisition, carefully hidden shell companies and investment vehicles that all led back to one place. Ethan Vale controlled 42% of Hale Corporation, not through his own name, not obviously, but through a web of purchases and proxies that his lawyers had assured him was completely legal and completely invisible until he chose to make it visible. He'd started buying shares 3 months after meeting Marina, not because he'd planned any of this, not because he'd been scheming, but because he'd done his research on Victor Hale and had seen what everyone else seemed to miss. The company was vulnerable, overextended, making risky bets that might pay off or might collapse the whole structure. Ethan had bought in as insurance, protection for Marina and Sophie in case Victor's empire crumbled. He'd never meant for it to become leverage. But now, his phone buzzed again. This time he looked. A text from James, his lawyer. Heard through channels about dinner. You okay? Ethan typed back, fine. May need those documents prepared sooner than planned. How soon? Wedding day. You sure? This will burn bridges. The bridges are already burning. I'm just making sure we don't go down with them. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, I'll have everything ready. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Ethan set down his phone and stared at the folder. Doing the right thing. That's what it felt like. But it also felt like detonating a bomb. And he wasn't entirely sure who would survive the blast. Upstairs, he could hear Marina moving around in Sophie's room, probably watching her sleep the way she did sometimes, like she was memorizing every detail. Marina had been honest with him early on. She couldn't have children of her own, a medical condition she'd discovered in her 20s, one of many reasons Victor had probably seen her as less valuable than his biological children might have been. But she loved Sophie like her own, had from the first moment, and Sophie loved her back with the uncomplicated certainty that only 6-year-olds could manage. That's what this was all for, Ethan reminded himself. Not revenge, not pride. Protection for the family he was building, the one Victor was trying to tear apart before it even fully existed. He put the folder back in the safe and locked it. Then he climbed the stairs to Sophie's room, where Marina stood by the bed, one hand resting gently on their daughter's back. She's beautiful, Marina whispered. Like her almost mother. Marina smiled without looking away from Sophie. 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Ethan agreed. What he didn't say. In 2 weeks, Victor Hale was going to learn exactly what kind of man his daughter had chosen. And depending on how he reacted, their wedding was either going to be perfect or was going to happen in the ruins of everything Victor had built. Either way, Ethan was done playing defense. The first call came at 6 in the morning, 2 days after the restaurant. Ethan was already awake, standing in his kitchen with coffee he wasn't drinking, watching dawn break over the city through windows that suddenly felt too exposed. His phone lit up with Victor's name, and he let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. Marina stumbled downstairs around 7, still in the shirt she'd stolen from Ethan's closet, her hair a mess that somehow made her more beautiful. Is that him? 4th time. Ethan finally picked up on the 5th ring. Victor, we need to talk. No greeting, no pretense at civility. My office, 9 o'clock. I'm busy. Cancel it. The line went dead. Marina wrapped her arms around herself. What does he want? To win. Ethan set his phone down harder than necessary. That's all he ever wants. But he went to the meeting anyway because not going would have been a different kind of surrender. Victor's office took up the top floor of the Hale Corporation Tower, all glass and steel and views that cost more than most people made in a lifetime. The receptionist, a woman named Alice who'd worked for Victor for 20 years, gave Ethan a look that might have been sympathy. He's expecting you. Conference room B. Not his office. The conference room, where Victor held meetings with people he needed to intimidate. Ethan walked in to find not just Victor, but 3 other men he recognized from Marina's forced descriptions of family gatherings. Richard Hale, Victor's younger brother. Thomas Hale, a cousin who ran European operations. And Gerald Moss, who wasn't family but had been Victor's lawyer long enough to count as one. Gentlemen? Ethan stayed standing near the door. This feels like an intervention. Sit down, Victor said. I'm fine here. Victor's jaw tightened. We're trying to have a civilized conversation. Are we? Because ambushing someone with your legal team doesn't usually count as civilized where I come from. Ethan glanced at Gerald. No offense. Some taken, Gerald said mildly. He was older than Victor by a decade, gray-haired and sharp-eyed in a way that made Ethan think of hunting birds. But Mr. Vale has a point. This is rather aggressive positioning. I don't have time for games, Victor snapped. The wedding is in 12 days. We need this settled. There's nothing to settle. I'm not signing your prenup. Marina and I are getting married. End of discussion. Richard leaned forward. He was thinner than Victor, nervous energy instead of commanding presence. You understand what you're asking, right? You're asking to marry into one of Chicago's oldest families with no protections in place, no safeguards, nothing to prevent you from walking away with... With what? Ethan interrupted. Marina's money? She doesn't have any. Everything she has came from Victor. Her apartment, her car, her credit cards, all provided by the man who loves to remind her she came from nothing. He looked at Victor. Isn't that right? You made sure she stayed dependent, grateful, controllable. I gave her opportunities, Victor said coldly. I gave her a life she never would have had otherwise. You gave her a cage with nice furniture. Ethan moved into the room now, pulled out a chair, sat down like he owned the place. And now you're surprised she wants out. Thomas spoke for the first time, his accent carrying traces of the 5 years he'd spent in London. This isn't about Marina's independence. This is about family assets, corporate integrity. You must understand, Mr. Vale, that Hale Corporation represents generations of work. We can't simply hand access to someone we barely know. I'm not asking for access to anything. Then sign the prenup. Gerald slid a new copy across the table. Updated language, more favorable terms. You'd receive a settlement based on length of marriage, $100,000 per year capped at 5 years. Very generous, considering. Ethan didn't touch the document. Considering what? Considering I'm marrying Marina, not buying stock in your company? Don't be naive, Victor said. Marriage to a Hale comes with benefits. Social standing, business connections, doors that open because of the name. You can't tell me you haven't thought about that. I've thought about waking up next to Marina for the rest of my life. I've thought about watching Sophie grow up with a mother who loves her. I've thought about building something real with someone who makes me better than I am. Ethan stood up. Your doors can stay closed. I don't need them. You're running a failing investment firm out of a rented office in a C-grade building, Richard said. He had papers in front of him, research someone had clearly done. Your client list is down 40% from last year. You're behind on your lease. Your only employee quit 3 months ago, and you haven't replaced her. These aren't the numbers of a man who doesn't need help. The accuracy stung more than Ethan wanted to admit. I'm restructuring. You're drowning. Victor's voice carried something that might have been genuine concern if Ethan didn't know better. Look, I get it. You've got pride. You don't want to admit you made mistakes. But this doesn't have to be adversarial. Sign the prenup, marry Marina, and I'll throw some business your way. Real clients, real money. Enough to get you back on your feet. In exchange for what? For understanding your place in this family. Victor spread his hands like he was being reasonable. I'm not asking you to disappear. I'm asking you to be smart. Protect Marina. Protect yourself. And let the people who know how to run things continue running them. Ethan walked to the window. 43 floors down, Chicago moved through its morning like none of this mattered. Cars and people and lives that would never intersect with this room or these men or the empire they were so desperate to protect. I need to ask you something, Ethan said, not turning around. Did you do this to Marina's mother? The silence behind him felt dangerous. That's not relevant, Victor said finally. It's extremely relevant. Marina told me you got her mother to sign away custody, made her feel like she wasn't good enough to raise her own daughter, paid her off and sent her away and told Marina she'd been abandoned. Her mother was a drug addict living in a rat-infested apartment. Victor's voice had gone cold. I saved Marina from that. I gave her a real chance. You gave yourself a daughter you could control. Ethan turned back. Someone who'd always owe you, always be grateful, always need your approval because you made sure she never forgot where she came from. Get out. Victor stood up. Get out of my building. Gladly. Ethan headed for the door, then stopped. One more thing. The wedding is happening, with or without your permission, with or without your money. Marina deserves better than being treated like property in a business deal, and I'm going to make sure she gets it. He left before anyone could respond, took the elevator down 43 floors with his heart trying to break through his ribs. The folder in his safe felt like it was burning a hole through the building. He could end this. One conversation, one revelation, and Victor would have no choice but to back down. But Marina would hate how it happened. She'd hate that he'd kept secrets. She'd hate that he'd solved her problems without telling her, like she was something to be managed instead of someone to trust. His phone rang as he hit the lobby. Marina. How bad? She asked. Scale of 1 to 10, 15. He pushed through the revolving doors into cold air that felt good against his face. They had research on my business. Numbers. They know more about my finances than my accountant does. I'm sorry. This is my fault. I should have... Stop. This isn't your fault. This is Victor being Victor. Ethan flagged down a cab. Where are you? The florist. Trying to figure out if we can afford roses or if we're going with carnations and hope. The casual way she said it made something in his chest crack. Marina. It's fine. Carnations are underrated. Very cottage-core. Pinterest loves them. I love you. I know. Her voice softened. Come meet me? I could use backup. The florist keeps showing me pictures of what we should have, and it's making me want to set things on fire. 20 minutes later, Ethan walked into a shop that smelled like every funeral and wedding he'd ever attended had a baby. Marina stood at a counter covered in sample arrangements, looking at price sheets like they were written in a foreign language. Okay, real talk, she said without looking up. Why does a peony cost more than my college textbooks? It's a flower. It grows in dirt. For free. The florist, a woman named Claire who probably heard this speech daily, smiled with professional patience. Peonies are seasonal, and they're very popular for June weddings. Supply and demand. It's October. Exactly. They have to be imported, shipped carefully. It's quite expensive. Marina set down the price sheet. Right. So carnations. Definitely carnations. Ethan moved beside her, looked at the numbers that made his own financial problems feel quaint. What were the peonies for? Everything. Bouquets, centerpieces, the arch. I had this whole vision. She laughed, but it sounded tired. Stupid, right? Spending thousands on flowers that die in a week. Not stupid. Ethan, we can't afford... What if we could? Marina finally looked at him. Really looked, the way she did when she was trying to figure out what he wasn't saying. What does that mean? Claire cleared her throat. I'll give you two some privacy. Just flag me down when you're ready to decide. She disappeared into the back room with the kind of tactical retreat that came from years of watching couples fight about money. Marina waited until she was gone, then crossed her arms. You're hiding something. Yes. Something big. Very big. And you're not going to tell me what it is. Ethan chose his words carefully. Not yet. But soon. I promise, Marina, everything I'm doing is to protect you, to protect us. I don't need protecting. I need honesty. She picked up a carnation from one of the sample vases, twirled it between her fingers. We're supposed to be partners. That means you tell me things, even the hard things, especially the hard things. I know, and I will. But right now, I'm asking you to trust me just a little longer. Can you do that? She was quiet for a long time, staring at the carnation like it held answers. Then she set it down. My whole life, men have told me to trust them, to wait, to be patient while they made decisions about my future. And every time it's turned out they were protecting their interests, not mine. I'm not them. Prove it. She met his eyes. Tell me what you're hiding. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Ethan could feel the words wanting to come out, the relief of finally sharing the burden. But he also felt the weight of what would come after. The questions, the complications, the reality that he'd been lying by omission for months. After the wedding, he said finally, I swear to you, Marina, the day after we're married, I'll tell you everything, every secret, every plan, every detail. But for now, I need you to trust that I'm doing this for the right reasons. And if I can't, then I'll tell you now, right here in this flower shop that smells like someone died and got married at the same time. But Marina, I'm asking, begging for 12 more days. Just 12. Can you give me that? She studied his face long enough that he started counting his own heartbeats. Then she nodded. 12 days. But that's it. After that, no more secrets. No more protecting me from things you think I can't handle. We're in this together, or we're not in it at all. Deal. Okay. She turned back to the counter, picked up the price sheet for carnations. Now help me figure out how to make these look less like a grocery store bouquet and more like something people will actually want to photograph. They spent an hour working with Claire on arrangements that wouldn't bankrupt them, mixing carnations with greenery and cheaper roses in colors that Marina had clipped from magazines. By the time they left, they had a plan that looked almost like what Marina wanted and cost about a third of the original budget. Not bad, Marina said as they walked to Ethan's car. I mean, it's not the peonies, but it's ours. We chose it. That counts for something. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Heard you had an interesting meeting this morning. Victor's not happy. Watch yourself. He deleted it without responding. The next 8 days felt like watching a slow-motion car crash. Victor didn't call again, but his presence was everywhere. The caterer called to say there'd been a mix-up with their deposit. The venue suddenly needed additional insurance that would cost extra. The photographer had a scheduling conflict, and could they move the date? Marina handled each crisis with a calm that Ethan knew cost her. She found a new caterer. She argued with the venue until they backed down. She found another photographer through a friend who owed her a favor. But the stress showed. In the way she stopped sleeping well. In the way she snapped at Sophie over nothing, then apologized with tears in her eyes. In the way she looked at Ethan sometimes, like she was waiting for him to admit this was all too hard, that Victor had won. 5 days before the wedding, Marina's phone rang at 2 a.m. Ethan woke to her sitting up in bed, staring at the screen. It's my mother, she whispered. Don't answer it. I have to. She never calls. Something must be... Marina swiped to accept. Mom? Ethan couldn't hear the other side, but he watched Marina's face cycle through emotions too fast to track. Confusion, anger, hurt. Then something that looked like resignation. How much did he pay you? Marina asked. Her voice had gone flat. No, don't lie to me. I know Victor called you. I know he... She stopped, listening. Right, okay. Thanks for the concern. Really feeling the maternal love here. She hung up and stared at the phone like it might bite her. What did she say? That I'm making a mistake. That Ethan Vale is using me. That I should listen to Victor because he's only trying to protect me. Marina's laugh came out broken. She hasn't called me in 3 years. 3 years. And suddenly she's concerned about my welfare. 2,000 miles away and she suddenly cares? Victor got to her. Obviously. Marina threw her phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor. I'm sorry, that was childish. That was justified. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped her arms around them. I keep thinking it can't get worse, that he can't find new ways to make this awful, and then he does. He always does. Ethan didn't have words that would help, so he just held her. Outside, the city moved through its night, indifferent to their small drama. Somewhere, Victor was probably sleeping soundly, satisfied with his latest move. The next morning, Sophie's school called. There'd been an incident. Someone had shown up claiming to be family, asking questions about Sophie's schedule. The school had followed protocol and sent them away, but they thought Ethan should know. Did they give a name? Ethan asked, already knowing the answer. No, sir, but they left a business card from Hale Corporation. Ethan hung up and called James immediately. He's investigating Sophie now. That's a line cross, and James sounded angry in a way Ethan rarely heard. That's family court material. That's Victor making sure I know he can reach anyone. Ethan was already pulling files from his safe. I'm done waiting. I need those documents ready. All of them. When? Wedding day, morning of. I want Victor to walk into that venue knowing exactly what he's dealing with. That's going to be ugly. It's already ugly. I'm just making sure we win. He spent the rest of the day with lawyers going over documents that outlined exactly what he controlled and how. The shell companies. The acquisition trail. The carefully constructed web that led back to one simple truth. Ethan Vale owned more of Hale Corporation than anyone except Victor himself. And if he wanted to, he could call a board meeting that would end with Victor removed from his own company. You sure about this timing? James asked for the third time. Revealing this on your wedding day? That's a lot of drama for what's supposed to be a happy occasion. Victor made it dramatic. I'm just responding in kind. Marina know? She will, soon. James gave him a look that said he thought this was a terrible idea, but he was being paid too much to argue. Your funeral, or wedding, whatever we're calling it at this point. 3 days before the ceremony, the final guest list came back. Half the people Marina had invited had sent regrets. Sudden conflicts, prior commitments, family emergencies that materialized overnight. The kind of mass exodus that only happened when someone powerful was applying pressure. Marina sat on their couch, staring at the responses spread across the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. My college roommate, my mentor from my first job, people I've known for years, all of them just bailing. They're afraid of Victor. I know. That's what makes it worse. They're choosing him over me because he has power, and I don't. Because being on his bad side costs more than being on mine. She picked up one of the cards, an expensive cream-colored thing with embossed lettering. This is from my best friend. Was my best friend. She wrote 3 sentences about how she's so sorry, but she really can't make it work. We don't need them. Ethan sat beside her. We need the people who show up. Everyone else is just decoration. Easy for you to say. You've got friends. You've got business partners who aren't scared of you. Marina's voice cracked. I've got exactly 3 confirmed guests who aren't related to you. 3 people in the whole city who are willing to risk Victor's wrath to watch me get married. Sophie wandered in from the kitchen, cookie crumbs on her face. Why are you sad? Marina wiped at her eyes quickly, trying to hide the tears. I'm not sad, sweetheart, just tired. You look sad. Sophie climbed onto the couch between them. Dad says when you're sad, you should have ice cream. It's science. Does he? Marina tried to smile. What kind of science? The good kind. Sophie leaned against her. Are you excited about the wedding? Very excited. Me too. I get to wear a fancy dress and throw flowers. Dad said I can throw them at people I don't like. I said no such thing, Ethan protested. You said I could throw them wherever I wanted. Same thing. Sophie looked up at Marina with 6-year-old seriousness. Are you going to be my real mom after? Marina's breath caught. I'm going to be your stepmom, which is like a real mom, but with a fancier title. But you'll stay? You won't leave like my first mom did? The question hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. Ethan started to intervene, to redirect, but Marina held up a hand. I'll stay, she said quietly. I promise, Sophie. I'm not going anywhere. Good. Sophie settled back against her. Because I like you better anyway. You read better bedtime stories. After Sophie went to bed that night, Ethan found Marina in his office, staring at his desk like she could see through the wood to the safe hidden behind the painting. "You're going to do something," she said. Not a question. "Yes." "Something big enough that you've been hiding it for months." "Yes." "Something that involves Victor and the company and all of this." She gestured vaguely at the window, the city, the mess their lives had become. "Yes." Marina turned to face him. "Is it legal?" "Completely." "Will it hurt people?" "It'll hurt Victor, maybe some of his inner circle, but it'll protect a lot more people than it hurts." She nodded slowly. "Okay. Okay. I'm still angry you kept secrets. I'm still going to want explanations. But right now, watching my life fall apart piece by piece while Victor plays puppet master." She moved closer to him. "Right now, I trust you to do whatever you need to do. Just promise me one thing. Anything. When you do it, when you drop whatever bomb you've been hiding, make sure it counts. Make sure he feels it. Make sure he knows exactly what it costs to treat people like property." Her eyes were hard in a way Ethan had never seen. "Can you do that?" "Yes." "Good." She kissed him, quick and fierce. 2 more days. Then we get married, and then you tell me everything. And then we figure out how to build a life where people like Victor don't get to win just because they have money and power. Deal. But as Marina left the office, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to set something in motion that wouldn't stop when he wanted it to. That revealing his control of Hale Corporation would be like opening a door he couldn't close. That marriage and revenge made terrible bedfellows, and he was inviting both to the same ceremony. His phone buzzed one more time. Victor's name. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Yes?" "The wedding's in 2 days," Victor said. No preamble. "Last chance to do this the smart way." "I'm not signing your prenup." "Then you're making a choice, and choices have consequences." Victor's voice carried absolute certainty. "I want you to understand that. When this all falls apart, when Marina realizes what you really are, when my lawyers tear apart your pathetic little life, I want you to remember that I gave you a way out." "I'll remember," Ethan said. "Will you?" "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means in 2 days one of us is going to regret how we handled this. And I don't think it's going to be me." He hung up before Victor could respond. Then he pulled out the folder one more time, looked at the documents that would change everything, and wondered if Marina would forgive him for solving her problems in exactly the way she'd spent her whole life hating. Only one way to find out. The morning of the wedding arrived with rain that turned Chicago into something out of a noir film. Ethan woke at 5, gave up on sleep by 5:15, and spent the next hour staring at his coffee like it might have answers. The folder sat on his kitchen counter, sealed in a manila envelope that James had delivered at midnight with a handshake that felt like a combat soldier's goodbye. "Everything you need," James had said. "Documentation, proof of ownership, the board resolution that'll force the vote. Victor won't know what hit him." Now, 6 hours before he was supposed to say vows to Marina, Ethan held the envelope and wondered if he was about to commit the most spectacular act of self-sabotage in recent history. His phone buzzed. Marina, texting from the hotel where she'd spent the night with Sophie and Mrs. Chen. "Tell me you're not getting cold feet." "Feet are warm. Everything else is questionable." "That's not reassuring." "I know. See you at the altar?" "You better." He set the phone down and opened the envelope. Inside, 43 pages of documentation that outlined exactly how Ethan Vale had spent 6 months quietly purchasing shares of Hale Corporation through a network of shell companies, investment vehicles, and proxies so carefully constructed that even Victor's own auditors hadn't noticed. Page 12 showed the final tally, 42% ownership. Page 15 showed what that meant in terms of voting rights. Page 20 showed the board resolution James had drafted, the one that would give Ethan effective control the moment he chose to reveal himself. The rest was supporting evidence, transfer records, acquisition dates, proof that every purchase was legal, documented, and absolutely devastating to Victor's grip on his own empire. Ethan's hands shook as he slid the pages back into the envelope. This wasn't just leverage. This was a nuclear option, and he was about to deploy it on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, then recognized the area code. New York, which meant it was probably one of Victor's people calling to make one last attempt at damage control. Vale. Mr. Vale, this is Caroline Weston. I'm on the board of Hale Corporation. Her voice was crisp, professional, carrying the kind of authority that came from decades in corporate warfare. I'm calling because I received some very interesting documentation this morning. Ethan's stomach dropped. What documentation? Regarding share ownership, voting rights, a pattern of acquisition that suggests someone has been quietly building a position in our company. A pause. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Who sent you the documentation? That's an interesting non-answer. Caroline's tone shifted slightly, warming by a few degrees. For what it's worth, Mr. Vale, I think what you've done is brilliant, audacious, and long overdue. Victor Hale has run this company like his personal kingdom for too long. If you're planning what I think you're planning, you'll have my vote. I haven't planned anything. Of course not. You're just a man getting married today. Congratulations, by the way. I hear it's quite the event. Another pause. But if you were planning something, you should know that you're not alone. There are others on the board who've been waiting for someone with enough backbone to challenge Victor. We've just been waiting for the right moment. And you think today is that moment? I think today is when Victor learns that money and power don't make you untouchable. They just make the fall more dramatic. Caroline's voice dropped. Good luck, Mr. Vale. I'll see you at the wedding. She hung up before Ethan could respond. He stared at his phone, trying to process what had just happened. Someone had sent board members his documentation, which meant someone had access to information that should have been locked down tight, which meant either James had betrayed him or someone else had figured out what he was doing. He called James immediately. Did you send acquisition records to Caroline Weston? What? No, I told you, complete lockdown until you gave the word. James sounded genuinely confused. Why? What happened? She called me, said she received documentation this morning about my ownership position. James swore, creative and thorough. That's not possible. The only copies are the ones I delivered to you last night. Unless, he stopped. Unless someone's been tracking the same trail we laid, following the shell companies backward. Victor must have hired investigators. And they reported to a board member instead of Victor? Makes sense if the board member was the one who hired them. Victor's not the only one who pays attention to company stock movements. James was typing something. Keyboard clicks loud through the phone. Okay, looking at this from another angle. If Caroline Weston knows, we have to assume others know too, which means your element of surprise is gone. Perfect. Just perfect. On the other hand, if she's offering support, maybe this plays in your favor. Victor can't fight a board revolt and your ownership claim at the same time. More typing. You want my advice? Move up the timeline. Don't wait for the reception. Do it before the ceremony. Before I get married? Are you insane? I'm practical. You reveal your position now, you control the narrative. You wait until after, and Victor has time to spin this as a betrayal, like you tricked Marina into marriage just to get leverage on her family. James stopped typing. Look, I know it's not ideal, but nothing about this situation is ideal. You're dropping a bomb either way. Might as well do it when you have maximum control. Ethan closed his eyes, tried to think through the haze of pre-wedding anxiety and sleep deprivation. James was right. Tactically, strategically, every logical bone in his body said to reveal the ownership now. Get it out in the open. Let Victor absorb the blow before the ceremony instead of after. But Marina would be furious. She'd specifically asked him to wait until after the wedding. She'd wanted one day, one single day, where her marriage wasn't contaminated by family, drama, and corporate warfare. And he was about to take that away from her. Ethan, you still there? Yeah, I'm here. He looked at the clock, 7:30. 3.5 hours until the ceremony. Set up a meeting, Victor and whoever he wants to bring. Conference room at the venue, 9 o'clock. You sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. He hung up and immediately called Marina. She answered on the first ring, sounding breathless. Hey, I'm kind of in the middle of hair and makeup. Can this wait? No, I need to tell you something. The background noise on her end went quiet. She must have stepped away from the stylist. What's wrong? Did something happen? Is Sophie okay? Sophie's fine, everyone's fine, but I'm about to do the thing I've been hiding, the thing I said I'd tell you about after the wedding. Ethan forced the words out before he could lose his nerve. I'm doing it this morning, before the ceremony. Silence. Then, you promised. I know. You said after. You said I'd have one day that was just ours. Her voice cracked. You promised me, Ethan. I'm sorry. Something changed. Information leaked. If I don't move now, I lose control of how this plays out. And Marina, I need you to trust that I'm doing this for the right reasons. That's what you keep saying. Trust you. Wait. Be patient. Like I'm a child who can't handle the truth. She was crying now, trying to hide it but failing. I'm so tired of men telling me what's best for me while they make decisions behind my back. This is different. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly the same. You made a choice without me. You're doing something that affects both of us without asking what I think. That's not partnership. That's just control with a nicer name. Ethan wanted to argue, to explain, to make her understand that this was necessary. But she was right. He'd been so focused on protecting her, on solving the Victor problem, that he'd forgotten to treat her like an equal, like someone capable of making her own choices. You're right, he said quietly. I should have told you everything from the start. I should have trusted you to handle it. I'm sorry. Are you going to tell me now? What you're doing? I own 42% of Hale Corporation. I've been buying shares for 6 months through shell companies. I have enough voting power to remove Victor from his own board. And in about 90 minutes, I'm going to tell him that in a conference room with whatever lawyers and family members he brings to the meeting. The words came out in a rush. That's the secret. That's what I've been hiding. The silence on the other end lasted so long that Ethan checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Finally, Marina spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You own my father's company. Part of it. Not enough to run it alone, but enough that he can't ignore me. Enough that he has to treat us as equals instead of treating me like a gold digger and you like property. How long have you been planning this? Since about a month after we met. I saw how he treated you, how he used money and control to keep you dependent, and I thought, Ethan stopped, trying to find words that wouldn't sound as manipulative as they felt. I thought if I had leverage, I could protect you. Protect us. By lying to me for half a year. By omission, not lying exactly. Don't! Her voice went sharp. Don't play word games with me. You lied. You kept secrets. You made major financial decisions that affect our future without telling me. That's lying. Own it. You're right. I lied. I'm sorry. Marina was quiet again. In the background, someone called her name, probably the stylist, wondering where she'd gone. I have to get back. People are waiting. Marina. We'll talk after. After you blow up my father's world and probably our wedding in the process. After you do whatever it is you think you need to do, then we'll talk about whether there's still an us to talk about. She hung up before he could respond. Ethan stood in his kitchen, holding a dead phone, feeling like he'd just set fire to the only good thing in his life. Then he looked at the envelope, at the documentation that represented 6 months of careful planning and careful hiding, and forced himself to get dressed. The venue was a converted warehouse on the north side, all exposed brick and industrial windows that Marina had fallen in love with because it felt honest. Not trying to be something it wasn't, just brick and glass and light. They'd rented it for the whole day, which now seemed like a blessing since Ethan was about to turn the morning into a corporate battlefield. He arrived at 8:30 to find James already there, setting up a laptop and printer in one of the side rooms that was supposed to be for storing wedding presents. Victor confirmed. He's bringing Richard, Thomas, and about 4 lawyers. Gerald Moss is leading the legal team. Fantastic! Nothing says romance like 7 hostile attorneys. You want to back out? James looked up from the laptop. It's not too late. We can say there was a misunderstanding. Push this to next week. And give Victor time to prepare? To spin the narrative? To make Marina think I'm worse than he is? Ethan shook his head. No, we do this now. We do it clean, and then I spend the rest of my life apologizing to my wife. Assuming she becomes your wife, James said it gently, but it landed hard. You know there's a real chance she walks away from this, right? That revealing this before the wedding instead of after is going to feel like a betrayal she can't forgive? I know, and you're doing it anyway. I'm doing it because it's the only play that doesn't make her a pawn in her father's game. Victor will use her against me if I wait. He'll make her choose. He'll poison every good thing about today with doubt and manipulation. Ethan pulled documents from the envelope, started laying them out on the table. This way, at least she knows the truth, all of it, and she can make her choice based on reality instead of whatever story Victor decides to tell. James didn't argue. He just fired up the laptop and started pulling up the files they'd need. Financial records, acquisition timelines, the board resolution that would force a vote on Victor's leadership. At 8:50, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Heavy, multiple people, the sound of men who owned spaces just by walking into them. Ethan stood up, straightened his tie, the one Marina had picked out, gray silk that matched her eyes, and prepared to go to war. Victor walked in first, flanked by Richard and Thomas. Behind them came the lawyers, Gerald in the lead with a briefcase that probably cost more than most people's cars. They filled the small room with the kind of presence that came from decades of assuming they'd win. "This better be important," Victor said. No greeting. No acknowledgement that they were at his daughter's wedding venue. "I've got a ceremony to shut down in an hour. Sit down, Victor." Ethan gestured to the chairs James had set up. "This won't take long. I'll stand. Say what you need to say so I can get back to canceling your wedding." "You're not canceling anything." Ethan picked up the first document, slid it across the table. "Because as of this morning, you don't have the authority." Victor glanced at the paper. Then he picked it up, read more carefully. His face went from annoyed to confused to something that might have been fear. "What is this?" "Proof of share acquisition. 42% of Hale Corporation purchased over the last 6 months through a network of investment vehicles and shell companies. All legal, all documented, all owned by me." Ethan laid out the next document. "This is the voting record. Shows that my shares, combined with the support I've already secured from 3 board members, gives me effective control of any major decision." Gerald Moss had gone pale. He grabbed the documents, started flipping through them with the kind of speed that came from knowing exactly what he was looking for. "This is impossible. We monitor share transfers. We would have seen this. You saw what I wanted you to see. Small purchases, different entities. Nothing that triggered your attention until the pattern was complete." Ethan felt something like satisfaction watching Victor's world tilt. By the time you realized what was happening, it was already done. "You son of a—" Victor started forward, but Thomas caught his arm. "Easy. Let's think about this rationally." "Rationally?" Victor yanked his arm free. "This parasite has been stealing my company while pretending to court my daughter. There's nothing rational about that. I didn't steal anything. I bought shares on the open market, same as anyone else." Ethan kept his voice level. "The difference is, I was smart enough to hide what I was doing until it mattered." Richard was reading through the documents now, his hands shaking slightly. "The board members. You said you have support." "Who?" "Caroline Weston, David Park, Sarah Mitchell." Ethan listed them like he was reading from a shopping list. "Between my shares and their votes, I control 54% of all major decisions, including votes of no confidence, including leadership changes." The room went very quiet. Outside, Ethan could hear people starting to arrive for the wedding. Voices, laughter, someone testing the microphone in the main hall, normal sounds that felt absurd given what was happening in this converted storage room. "What do you want?" Victor's voice had gone flat. "Money? A position at the company? Your debt forgiven? Name your price." "I don't want your money. I want you to stop treating Marina like property. I want you to back off. Let us get married without your threats and your manipulation and your constant reminders that she should be grateful you didn't leave her in poverty." Ethan picked up the final document, the one James had drafted 3 days ago. "This is a board resolution. It removes you as CEO, installs an interim leadership team until a proper search can be conducted, and it kicks you off the board entirely." "You're bluffing." But Victor didn't sound certain. "I'm not. I can file this resolution this afternoon. Call an emergency board meeting. Have you removed by Monday morning." Ethan set the paper down. "Or you can make a different choice." "What choice?" "You let this wedding happen exactly as Marina planned it. You smile for the cameras. You give a nice speech about how happy you are for your daughter. You stop interfering in our lives." Ethan leaned forward. "And in exchange, I don't destroy everything you've built. I keep my ownership quiet. I vote with you on major decisions as long as they're in the company's best interest. I let you keep running things, for now. Gerald was writing furiously on a legal pad, probably outlining all the ways this was legally questionable. Thomas looked like he was trying to calculate odds. Richard just looked sick. Victor stared at Ethan with eyes that promised violence. You think you've won. You think having shares makes you powerful, but you don't understand how this world works. I can bury you. I can destroy your reputation, your business, your name. By tomorrow, nobody in Chicago will touch you. Maybe. But by tomorrow, I'll own your company, and Marina will be my wife. So you'll have destroyed your own daughter's husband, which doesn't seem like great optics for a man who claims everything he does is for family. Ethan crossed his arms. Your choice, Victor. You can have your empire and your pride, but you can't have both. The silence stretched. Outside, someone was playing piano, probably warming up for the ceremony. The sound drifted through the walls, something classical that Ethan didn't recognize but Marina probably loved. I need time, Victor said finally, to think about this, to consult with my team. You have until the ceremony starts, 11 o'clock. At 11:01, if you haven't given me your word that you'll behave, I make a phone call. The board resolution gets filed. And by Monday, you're just another former CEO trying to explain how he lost control of his own company. Ethan checked his watch. That gives you about 75 minutes. Use them wisely. Victor looked at Gerald, who shrugged helplessly. Looked at Richard and Thomas, who both found the floor very interesting. Then he looked back at Ethan with something that might have been respect if it wasn't buried under layers of hate. Did Marina know about any of this? She found out this morning, about 30 minutes ago. Ethan met his eyes. And she's furious with me. So if you're thinking you can use this to drive a wedge between us, she beat you to it. The difference is, I'm planning to spend the rest of my life making it up to her. You're just planning your next manipulation. You don't know anything about me. I know everything about you. I spent 6 months studying you, your business patterns, your relationships, the way you use money and control to keep people dependent. I know exactly who you are, Victor. That's how I knew where to hit. Victor's jaw clenched. Then he turned and walked out, his entourage following like ducks in a row. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. James waited until their footsteps faded, then let out a breath. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the dumbest. Still calculating which. Me too. Ethan sat down hard, suddenly exhausted. Did I just destroy my wedding? Probably. But you might have saved your marriage. If Marina's willing to forgive you for being a complete idiot about how you handled this. She's not going to forgive me. She might. Women are weird about grand gestures, and taking down her controlling father to protect her autonomy is pretty grand. James started packing up the laptop. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Victor needed to know he doesn't own the world, and Marina needed to know you're willing to fight for her. By keeping secrets and dropping bombs on her wedding day. Yeah, I'm basically a romantic hero. You're something. James clapped him on the shoulder. Now go find your bride and grovel. You've got about an hour before this whole thing either comes together or falls completely apart. Ethan left the storage room and walked toward the main hall, where the wedding was supposed to happen, where Marina was probably pacing and angry and trying to decide if she still wanted to marry someone who'd just proven he was exactly like every other man who'd made decisions for her without asking. He found her in the bride's room, sitting in front of a mirror while a stylist worked on her hair. She was wearing the dress, simple white silk that somehow made her look like she belonged in old movies, and she was crying. "Everyone out," Ethan said. The stylist looked at Marina, who nodded. 5 minutes, that's all he gets. When they were alone, Ethan knelt beside her chair. I'm sorry, that's not enough. Marina's reflection stared at him from the mirror. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't make it okay that you've been lying to me for months, that you made major life decisions without me, that you're using my wedding day as leverage in a corporate war. You're right. It doesn't fix anything. But I need you to understand why I did it. Ethan took her hand, felt her fingers stay limp instead of gripping back. Victor was going to cancel this wedding. He was going to use his money and power to humiliate you, to make you choose between him and me, to prove that you were still under his control. And I couldn't let that happen. So you took control instead, made yourself the powerful one, became just another man who knows what's best for me. No, I became the man who's willing to burn his own life down to protect yours. There's a difference. Marina pulled her hand away. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, you both think you own pieces of my future. You're just fighting over who gets the bigger piece. The words hit harder than any of Victor's threats. Ethan sat back on his heels, trying to find an argument that wouldn't sound like everything she'd just accused him of. You're right, he said finally. I treated this like a problem I could solve instead of a decision we should make together. I thought I was protecting you, but really I was just protecting my idea of what our life should look like. And that's not partnership. That's just control with better intentions. So what now? You've already set everything in motion. Victor knows. The board knows. There's no taking it back. No. But there's still a choice. Ethan stood up. You can marry me anyway, knowing I'm an idiot who makes terrible decisions when I'm trying to be noble. Or you can walk away. Tell me this is too much. That you need someone who trusts you enough to be honest, instead of someone who thinks protecting you means keeping secrets. Marina stared at him for a long time. Her makeup was running slightly from the tears, giving her the kind of imperfect beauty that made Ethan's chest ache. I hate that you did this. I know. I hate that my wedding day is now part of a corporate takeover, that I'm going to walk down that aisle knowing my father is out there plotting his revenge, that every person in that room is going to remember this as the day Ethan Vale humiliated Victor Hale, not the day we got married. I know, but I also understand why you did it, and I think part of me knew you were planning something. I just didn't want to admit it, because then I'd have to make decisions I wasn't ready for. She stood up, smoothed her dress. Do you love me? More than I thought I could love anyone. More than you love winning? The question caught him off guard. This isn't about winning, isn't it? You spent 6 months playing a game Victor didn't know he was in. You waited until the perfect moment to reveal your hand. You backed him into a corner where he has to choose between his pride and his power. That's winning. Marina stepped closer. So I need to know, do you love me more than you love beating him? Ethan opened his mouth to answer, then closed it, because she deserved the truth, and the truth was complicated. I don't know. Maybe they're the same thing. Maybe beating him is how I prove I love you enough to fight for you. That's a terrible answer. It's an honest one. Marina studied his face, looking for something Ethan wasn't sure he had. Then she reached up, straightened his tie that had gone crooked during the confrontation with Victor. Okay? Okay? Okay, I'll marry you. Not because you defeated my father, not because you own his company, but because somewhere in all this manipulation and secret-keeping and terrible decision-making, you're the only person who's ever tried to give me power instead of taking it away. She smoothed the collar of his shirt. But after today, no more secrets. No more protecting me from things you think I can't handle. We're partners, or we're nothing. Understand? I understand. Good. Now get out of here before you see the rest of my dress. Bad luck. Marina, I said get out. But she was smiling, just slightly. I'll see you at the altar. Don't be late. Ethan left before he could second-guess the miracle that had just happened. In the hallway, he nearly collided with Sophie, who was spinning in her flower girl dress like she was trying to achieve liftoff. Is Marina still marrying you? Sophie asked. Mrs. Chen said maybe not because of yelling. She's still marrying me. Good. I already learned how to throw flowers. I don't want to waste it. Sophie grabbed his hand. Dad? Is Grandpa Victor going to be mad at us? The question stopped Ethan cold. Because of course Sophie knew. Of course she'd picked up on the tension, the fighting, the reality that her life was about to get more complicated in ways a 6-year-old shouldn't have to worry about. Maybe, Ethan said honestly. For a while. But we'll figure it out. Will he still let me visit? I don't know, sweetheart. Sophie nodded seriously, like she'd expected that answer. Okay, but if he doesn't, it's okay. Because I have you. And Marina. And that's enough. She spun away to practice her flower-throwing technique on an imaginary crowd. Ethan watched her and tried not to think about all the ways this day could still go wrong. At 10:50, James found him. Victor's in the main hall. He looks like he's about to have a stroke, but he's there. I think that means we won. We haven't won anything yet. Ethan took his place at the altar, watching guests file in with expressions that ranged from curious to confused to openly hostile. Half of them were probably Victor's people, here to witness what they thought would be a canceled wedding or humiliating retreat. At exactly 11 o'clock, the music started. Sophie walked down the aisle first, throwing flowers with aggressive enthusiasm that made several people duck. Then Marina appeared at the back of the hall, and everything else fell away. She was walking alone. No father to give her away. No symbolic transfer of ownership. Just Marina, choosing to walk toward Ethan on her own terms. And in the third row, Victor Hale sat with his jaw clenched and his hands gripped tight on his knees, watching his daughter choose someone else. Watching his power mean nothing. Watching himself lose. Marina reached the altar, took Ethan's hands, and whispered, "I'm still angry with you." "I know," he whispered back. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." "Good. Now marry me before I change my mind." The ceremony happened in a blur. Words about love and commitment and choosing each other. Rings exchanged. Vows that felt both too simple and too complicated for what they were actually promising each other. And through it all, Ethan couldn't stop looking at Victor, watching the man absorb his defeat with the kind of dignity that only came from practice. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Ethan kissed Marina like they were the only people in the room. Like the last hour hadn't happened. Like they were just two people who'd found each other and decided that was enough. But as they walked back down the aisle, newly married and catastrophically complicated, Ethan caught Victor's expression. Not beaten, not accepting, just waiting. The war wasn't over. It had barely started. The reception started with champagne that tasted like victory and felt like a mistake. Marina kept her hand in Ethan's like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go, and he couldn't tell if it was love or the need for an anchor in a room that felt increasingly hostile. Half the guests were taking photos with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. The other half weren't bothering to pretend. Victor stood near the bar, surrounded by Richard and Thomas, and a cluster of people who looked like they'd been pulled from a corporate board meeting. He hadn't approached them yet, hadn't offered congratulations or hollow pleasantries. He just watched from across the room with the kind of patience that came from knowing the game wasn't over. "He's planning something," Marina said quietly. She was staring at her father over the rim of her champagne glass. "I can see it. That look he gets when he's already 3 moves ahead." "Let him plan." Ethan pulled her closer. "We're married. That's what matters." "Is it?" She looked up at him. "Because in about an hour we have to do the father-daughter dance. And I'm trying to figure out if I should use that time to warn you or to run. We could skip it. We could, but that would be admitting he still has power over me. That I'm still afraid of him." Marina set down her glass with more force than necessary. "I'm done being afraid." Sophie appeared at their side, her flower girl dress smudged with what looked like cake frosting even though dinner hadn't been served yet. "There's a man asking about you, the angry grandpa." "Victor?" Ethan tensed. "What did he say?" "That he wants to talk to you in private. He used his scary voice." Sophie considered this. "I told him you were busy being married and he should wait his turn. Was that wrong?" Marina laughed, sharp and slightly hysterical. "That was perfect, sweetheart. You're my new bodyguard." But Victor didn't wait his turn. He crossed the room with the kind of deliberate stride that made people step aside without being asked, his entourage trailing behind like he was leading a parade. He stopped directly in front of Ethan and Marina, close enough that the air felt crowded. "Congratulations," he said. The word came out flat, stripped of any actual warmth. "Quite the ceremony, very intimate, unexpected." "Thank you for coming," Marina said. Her voice had gone careful, the tone she used when she was trying not to start a fight. "Wouldn't miss it." Victor's smile didn't reach anywhere important. "Though I have to say I'm surprised you went through with it. After everything that happened this morning, after learning what your new husband has been hiding from you. Dad, not here. Not now. When then? When's the appropriate time to discuss the fact that Ethan has been lying to you for months? That he built his entire relationship with you on deception?" Victor turned to Ethan. "Or did you tell her everything? About the shell companies, the proxies? How you started buying shares of my company before you even knew if you loved my daughter?" People were starting to notice. Conversations dying, heads turning, the kind of audience that made private disasters into public spectacles. "We're not doing this," Ethan said quietly. "Not at our wedding. You want to have this conversation? We can schedule it for Monday. In a boardroom. With lawyers. Oh, we'll definitely be having conversations in boardrooms. I've already scheduled an emergency session for Tuesday. Full board. Full audit of every share transaction in the last year. Victor's voice rose just enough to carry. I think they'll be very interested to learn about your creative accounting, the way you hid your ownership, the way you manipulated markets. I didn't manipulate anything. I bought shares legally, all documented, all above board. We'll see what the SEC thinks about that. Victor was smiling now, genuine pleasure breaking through the corporate mask. I made some calls this morning. Turned out a few people at the Securities and Exchange Commission were very curious about your acquisition pattern, very interested in whether you had material, non-public information that influenced your purchases. Marina's hand tightened on Ethan's. You can't be serious. You're threatening him with federal investigation at our wedding? I'm protecting our family, our company, our legacy. Victor looked at his daughter with something that might have been sadness if it wasn't so strategic. I know you think you love him. I know you think this is real. But Marina, sweetheart, he's been using you from the start. Everything he did was calculated to get access to what we have. What you have, Marina corrected. I don't have anything. You've made that very clear over the years. You have a name. You have connections. You have... I have nothing you didn't give me with strings attached, her voice cracked. And I'm tired of pretending those strings don't exist, that every gift isn't a leash, that every opportunity doesn't come with conditions. Victor's face shifted, hurt replacing calculation for just a moment. Is that really what you think? That I've been controlling you? After everything I've done? Everything I've sacrificed? You didn't sacrifice anything. You made investments. In my gratitude, in my dependence, in your ability to remind me forever that I came from nothing, and you gave me everything. Marina was shaking now. Well, congratulations, you succeeded. I've been grateful. I've been obedient. I've been exactly the daughter you wanted me to be. And now? Victor's voice dropped to something dangerous. Now you're going to throw all that away for a man who lied to you? Who's been playing corporate chess with your family's company while pretending to care about you? He does care about me. He cares about winning, about proving he's smarter than me, about taking what's mine. Victor gestured around the room. This whole wedding is just theater, a performance to make you think he's the hero while I'm the villain. But Marina, I'm your father. Everything I've done has been to protect you. From what? From making my own choices? From being with someone who actually treats me like an equal? Marina pulled away from Ethan, stepped closer to Victor. You want to know the difference between you and him? Ethan told me what he did. This morning, before the wedding, he came clean about everything. He gave me the choice. And you know what? I chose him anyway. Not because he's perfect, not because he handled this well, but because when he keeps secrets, it's to protect me. When you keep secrets, it's to control me. The room had gone completely silent. Even the piano player had stopped, watching the family drama unfold like it was dinner theater. Victor looked at his daughter with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. Pain, maybe. Or pride. Or just the recognition that he was losing a fight he thought was already won. If you marry him, Victor said slowly, if you stay married to him, knowing what he is, knowing what he's done, there will be consequences. For both of you. We're already married, Marina said, legally, officially, in front of everyone here, so your threats are about 6 hours too late. Are they? Victor pulled something from his jacket pocket, an envelope, thick and official looking. This is a petition for guardianship of Sophie, filed this morning on the grounds that Ethan Vale is an unfit parent who's engaged in fraud, deception, and manipulation for financial gain. The world tilted sideways. Ethan felt Marina's hand find his again, gripping so hard it hurt. You wouldn't, Marina whispered. I would. I am. I have lawyers ready to argue that a man who's been investigated by the SEC, who's been building hidden corporate empires while raising a 6-year-old, who's demonstrated a pattern of deception, that man shouldn't have custody of a child. Victor set the envelope on the nearest table. Of course, all of this could go away. The investigation, the custody battle, the emergency board meeting, all of it, if you make the right choice. Let me guess, Ethan said. His voice came out steadier than he felt. I sign over my shares, walk away from Hale Corporation. Probably walk away from Marina, too. Not necessarily. You can stay married if you want, but you'll sign a post-nuptial agreement. You'll dissolve your ownership, and you'll accept a position at the company where I can keep an eye on you. Victor's smile was thin. Think of it as joining the family business, properly, under supervision. Marina made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. This is insane. You can't blackmail people into, I can do whatever's necessary to protect what's mine. Victor cut her off. And right now, what's mine is being threatened by a man who's proven he'll lie, cheat, and manipulate to get what he wants. I'm simply responding in kind. Ethan looked at the envelope, at Victor's face, at the room full of people who were absolutely going to talk about this for years. Then he looked at Marina, at the devastation in her eyes, and made a decision. No, he said quietly. No? Victor repeated it like he'd misheard. No, I'm not signing over my shares, I'm not dissolving my ownership, and I'm sure as hell not working under your supervision. Ethan picked up the envelope, held it for a moment, then set it back down. You want to fight for custody of Sophie? Go ahead. Bring your lawyers, bring your investigators, bring whoever you need to bring. But you're going to lose because I'm not an unfit parent. I'm just a man who outsmarted you and you can't stand it. You think you're smarter than my legal team? I think I'm smarter than you, and I think your legal team knows it. Ethan pulled out his phone, typed something quick, hit send. I just forwarded documentation to the SEC myself, showing every purchase, every transaction, every completely legal acquisition. I'm inviting them to investigate, to audit, to examine every single move I made, because I have nothing to hide. Can you say the same about Hale Corporation? Victor's expression flickered, just for a second, but Ethan caught it. Uncertainty, maybe fear. You're bluffing. Am I? Because I seem to remember some creative accounting on your European acquisitions, some transfers that might not look great under federal scrutiny, some partnerships with companies that have interesting connections to offshore accounts. Ethan stepped closer. You want to turn this into a legal war? Fine. But remember that I spent 6 months studying your company, learning every detail, finding every crack in the foundation. You really want regulators looking that closely? The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of something catastrophic. Richard and Thomas had gone pale. Gerald Moss was whispering urgently into Victor's ear. The guests were frozen, champagne glasses halfway to mouths, watching a wedding reception turn into corporate warfare. Sophie appeared between them, her flower girl dress trailing, her face serious. Why is everyone yelling? The question broke the moment. Victor looked down at his granddaughter, because that's what she was, even if the relationship was new and complicated, and something in his face softened. We're not yelling, sweetheart. We're just discussing business. It sounds like yelling. You have your angry voice. Sophie looked up at Ethan. Dad? Are you and Grandpa Victor fighting? Ethan knelt down to her level. Yes, we are. But it's grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Is it about me? I heard him say my name. The directness of children, the way they cut through pretense and got straight to the wound. Ethan glanced at Marina, who looked like she might break into pieces right there on the reception floor. It's complicated, Ethan said finally. But I promise you, Sophie, nothing's going to change. You're staying with me. With us. Marina and me. We're a family now. Forever? Forever. Sophie seemed satisfied with this. She hugged Ethan quickly, then turned to Victor. Grandpa Victor, are you going to try to take me away? Victor looked at the little girl like she'd stabbed him. No, of course not. I just want to make sure you're safe, that you're being taken care of properly. I am. Dad takes good care of me, and Marina reads me stories and helps with my homework and teaches me how to braid hair, even though she's not very good at it yet. Sophie said it all matter-of-factly, like she was listing ingredients. So you don't have to worry. We're okay. She skipped away, back to the kids' table where some cousins Ethan had never met were making towers out of bread rolls. The adults stood in awkward silence, watching her go. She's right, you know, Marina said quietly. We're okay. Not perfect. Not without problems. But okay. And you threatening to tear that apart because you can't control it? That's not protection, Dad. That's just cruelty. Victor looked at his daughter for a long moment. Then he looked at Ethan, then at the envelope still sitting on the table between them. This isn't over, he said finally. Tuesday. Board meeting. We'll settle this properly. With votes and documentation and lawyers, the way these things should be settled. I'll be there, Ethan said. So will I, Marina added, because it's my family's company too. Or did you forget that part? Victor's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He just turned and walked away, his entourage scrambling to follow. Richard threw an apologetic look over his shoulder. Thomas looked relieved to be leaving. Gerald Moss looked like he was already calculating billable hours. When they were gone, the room slowly came back to life. Conversations resumed at lower volumes. The piano player started again, something soft and non-confrontational. People went back to pretending they hadn't just witnessed a family implode in real time. Marina turned to Ethan. Did that actually just happen? Did my father actually threaten to take Sophie and then back down because a 6-year-old told him we were okay? I think so. I'm still processing. Me too. She picked up her champagne, drained it, set the glass down harder than necessary. I think I hate weddings. Is it too late to elope? We're already married. Right, forgot. Marina laughed, but it sounded broken. So what now? We dance? We cut the cake? We pretend everything's normal while we wait for Tuesday's board meeting to destroy our lives? We could leave? Just go. Forget the reception. Take Sophie and disappear for a week. Marina looked tempted. Then she looked around the room, at the few friends who'd shown up despite Victor's pressure, at the decorations she'd chosen, at the wedding she'd planned even when it seemed impossible. No, she said. We stay. We have our first dance. We cut the cake. We celebrate the fact that we just survived Victor Hale at his worst and we're still standing. That deserves a party. You sure? I'm not sure about anything, but I'm tired of letting him ruin things. So we're going to dance and smile and make this the best mediocre wedding reception Chicago has ever seen. She grabbed his hand. Come on, the DJ's playing our song. Ethan let her pull him onto the dance floor. The song was one they'd picked weeks ago, something about finding home in another person. It felt both perfect and ridiculous given everything that had just happened. They moved together awkwardly at first, too aware of the eyes on them, too conscious of the drama still hanging in the air. But then Marina rested her head against his chest, and Ethan stopped thinking about Victor, or board meetings, or custody battles. He just focused on the woman in his arms and the fact that somehow, against all odds and common sense, she'd chosen him. I meant what I said earlier, Marina whispered, about being angry with you. I'm still furious about the secrets, about the way you handled this. I know, but I also understand why you did it, and I think maybe that's what marriage is. Being furious and understanding at the same time, wanting to kill someone and also wanting to protect them from everyone else who wants to kill them. That's a terrible definition of marriage. It's our definition. We can make it work. She pulled back to look at him. But Ethan, after Tuesday, after the board meeting and whatever happens with Victor, we need to figure out how to be honest with each other. Real honest, not strategic honest or protective honest, just honest. Deal. And you need to stop trying to solve all my problems without telling me. I'm not a puzzle. I'm a person. And persons get to participate in their own rescues. I'll work on that. Good. She kissed him, soft and quick. Now smile. People are watching. Let's give them something to talk about besides corporate warfare. They danced through 2 more songs, then cut the cake with a knife that Marina wielded like a weapon. Sophie gave a speech that was mostly about how she liked having a mom now, and also could they get a dog? The best man, James, looking uncomfortable in a tux, gave a toast that carefully avoided mentioning anything that had happened in the last 8 hours. Around 8 o'clock, Victor and his people left. No goodbye. No final confrontation. They just gathered their coats and walked out like the wedding had been a business meeting that ran too long. Marina watched them go with an expression Ethan couldn't read. You okay? Ask me in a week, or a year, or never. She turned back to the reception. Right now, I just want to dance with my husband and not think about fathers or companies or threats. They danced until Marina's feet hurt from her heels, and Sophie fell asleep on a chair, her head pillowed on her arms. They danced until most of the guests had left, until the venue staff started giving them pointed looks about cleanup time, until it was just them and the DJ and the ghosts of everything they'd survived to get here. In the car on the way home, Sophie woke up long enough to ask, "Are we a real family now?" "We're a real family," Marina confirmed. Even with Grandpa Victor being mad? Especially with Grandpa Victor being mad. Marina glanced at Ethan. Sometimes the realest families are the ones that have to fight to stay together. Sophie accepted this with the easy logic of childhood and fell back asleep. Ethan drove through Chicago's streets that felt different now, like the city had rearranged itself while they were at the wedding. Marina held his hand across the center console, her wedding ring catching streetlight. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Tuesday. The board meeting. All the ways this could still go wrong. Stop thinking about Tuesday. Think about tonight, about the fact that we're married and we're going home and tomorrow we get to wake up as a family. And then Tuesday happens and maybe I lose everything. You won't lose everything. Marina squeezed his hand. Worst case, you lose the company shares. You lose the leverage. Victor wins the corporate war. But you don't lose me. You don't lose Sophie. You don't lose the things that actually matter. The shares matter. They're protection. They're just pieces of paper representing pieces of a company. They're not love. They're not family. They're not worth destroying yourself over. She looked at him in the darkness of the car. Promise me something. Promise me that if it comes down to a choice between keeping the shares and keeping us whole, you'll choose us. It won't come to that. Promise me anyway. Ethan wanted to argue, to explain that the shares weren't separate from keeping them whole, that having leverage on Victor was the only thing that would keep the man from spending the rest of their lives trying to tear them apart. But Marina was looking at him with eyes that had seen too much today, and he couldn't add one more burden. I promise. They got home around 10, carried Sophie up to her bed without waking her, stood in her doorway watching her sleep like parents in commercials. Then they went to their own room, theirs now, officially, legally, and sat on the edge of the bed in silence. So, Marina said finally, we're married. We are. And your company shares might get investigated, and my father might try to destroy us. And we have a board meeting in 3 days that could end with you losing everything you've built. That about covers it. Great, just checking. She kicked off her heels, started working on the buttons of her dress. Help me with this? I can't reach the back. Ethan moved behind her, undid the tiny buttons that ran down her spine. The dress fell away and Marina stepped out of it, left it pooled on the floor like neither of them cared what happened to expensive things anymore. I have one more question, she said, turning to face him, and I need you to answer honestly. No protection, no strategy, just truth. Okay. Do you regret it? Buying the shares? Starting this war? Turning our wedding into a battlefield? She searched his face. If you could go back knowing what you know now, would you do it differently? Ethan thought about the restaurant 2 weeks ago, about Victor sliding that prenup across the table, about the moment he'd decided that being powerless wasn't an option, about 6 months of careful planning and careful hiding. No, he said finally. I wouldn't change it, because the alternative was letting Victor control our lives forever, and I couldn't live with that. I couldn't watch you shrink every time he reminded you where you came from. I couldn't let Sophie grow up thinking that's what family looks like. Even if it means losing everything? Even then, because Marina, I didn't do this to win. I did this so we'd have a choice. So you'd have a choice. And if Tuesday goes badly, if Victor somehow manages to turn this around, at least we'll have fought back. At least we won't have just accepted his version of how our lives should go. Marina was quiet for a long time. Then she kissed him, slow and deliberate, like she was making a decision. Okay, she whispered against his mouth. Okay. We fight. Tuesday we walk into that boardroom and we fight. Together this time. No more secrets, no more protecting me from the hard parts. Together, Ethan agreed. They made love that night like they were trying to prove something to themselves, that they were real, that they chose this, that whatever came next, they'd face it as the family they'd decided to become. Afterward, lying in the dark with Marina's head on his chest and her breathing evening out into sleep, Ethan stared at the ceiling and ran through scenarios. Victor would come hard at the board meeting. He'd have ammunition, the SEC inquiry, questions about Ethan's acquisition methods, maybe even character witnesses to paint him as unstable. Gerald Moss would be thorough and vicious, but Ethan had Caroline Weston, David Park, Sarah Mitchell, 3 board members who'd already indicated support. He had documentation proving every purchase was legal, He had 6 months of careful planning that would be hard to unravel. What he didn't have was certainty. And certainty was what he needed to protect the woman sleeping against him and the child down the hall who called him dad without hesitation. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from an unknown number. "Congratulations on the wedding. Sorry about Tuesday. Nothing personal." Ethan deleted it without responding. Then he turned off his phone, wrapped his arms around Marina, and tried to believe that love and strategy could coexist, that protecting your family and being honest with them weren't mutually exclusive, that somehow, despite all evidence to the contrary, this was all going to work out. Outside, Chicago moved through its Saturday night, indifferent to the small dramas playing out in townhouses and penthouses and converted warehouses across the city. Somewhere, Victor was probably planning his next move. Somewhere, lawyers were preparing arguments. Somewhere, the machinery of corporate warfare was grinding forward toward Tuesday. But in this room, right now, Ethan let himself forget about all of that. Let himself just be a man who'd married the woman he loved and was trying, badly, imperfectly, desperately, to build something that would last. Marina stirred against him. "Stop thinking so loud. I can hear you worrying from here." "Sorry." "Don't be sorry, just sleep. We'll worry tomorrow, and the day after, and probably every day for the rest of our lives." She pressed closer. "But tonight, we just sleep. Deal?" "Deal." He closed his eyes and tried to follow his own advice. Tried to silence the part of his brain that was already preparing for Tuesday, already calculating odds and outcomes. Tried to just be present in this moment, in this bed, with this woman who'd chosen him despite every reason not to. Sleep came eventually, restless and full of dreams about boardrooms and custody battles and 6-year-olds asking questions he didn't know how to answer. But it came. And when morning arrived, gray and cold through windows that needed cleaning, Ethan woke up married. Complicated. Terrified. But married. And for now, that would have to be enough. Sunday passed in a strange fog of domestic normalcy that felt like the calm before artillery fire. Marina made pancakes that came out slightly burned. Sophie insisted on syrup ratios that defied physics. Ethan pretended to read the newspaper while actually rehearsing arguments he'd need for Tuesday. They looked like a family. They almost felt like one. But the weight of what was coming pressed down on everything. Monday morning, James called at 7. "We have a problem." Ethan was already awake, had been since 5, staring at his laptop like the numbers might rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. "Just one?" Victor filed an injunction. "He's trying to block you from voting your shares at tomorrow's meeting, says you acquired them through deceptive practices, that you had material, non-public information, that the whole thing amounts to stock manipulation." James sounded tired. "His lawyers filed it late Friday. We didn't catch it until this morning." "Can he do that?" "He did do that. Whether it holds up is another question. I've got our team preparing a response, but Ethan, this changes the game. If the injunction stands even temporarily, you walk into that boardroom with no power, just accusations." Marina appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, her hair a mess. She mouthed the word coffee, and Ethan nodded. She disappeared toward the kitchen while he tried to process what James was saying. "What are our odds of getting the injunction dismissed by tomorrow? 30%. Maybe 40 if we get lucky with the judge." James paused. "But even if we beat it, Victor's made his play clear. He's not trying to win fair. He's trying to destroy your credibility before you even get to use your shares." "So we fight dirty too." "I was hoping you'd say that." James sounded almost cheerful. "I've been going through Hale Corporation's financials. The European acquisitions you mentioned? There's some creative accounting there. Nothing provably illegal, but enough to raise questions. If Victor wants to invite regulatory scrutiny, we can make sure that scrutiny goes both ways." Ethan closed his laptop. Through the window, Chicago was waking up to another gray November day. Somewhere in this city, Victor was probably having the same conversation with his own lawyers. 2 men, circling each other, using corporations and legal systems as weapons. "Do it," Ethan said. "Whatever you need to do. But James, make sure it's clean. I don't want to win by becoming him." "Understood. I'll keep you posted." Marina came back with coffee, handed him a mug that said, "World's okayest dad," that Sophie had bought him for his birthday. "Bad news? Victor's trying to block my shares, filed an injunction claiming I manipulated the market." "Did you?" No, I bought stock legally, lots of it, quietly, but legally. Ethan took a long drink of coffee that was too hot and didn't care. He's just trying to undermine me before the meeting, make the board question whether I should be there at all. Marina sat down beside him, pulled her knees to her chest. What if he wins? What if the injunction holds and you can't vote? Then we lose. Victor keeps control, and we spend the next decade fighting custody battles and corporate warfare and whatever else he throws at us. That's it? That's our plan B? Just lose and suffer? You got a better idea? Marina was quiet for a moment, staring at her own coffee like it might have answers. Then she looked up with an expression Ethan had learned to recognize. The one that meant she'd decided something and there was no talking her out of it. I go to the meeting, she said, not as your wife, as Victor's daughter, as someone who grew up in that world, who knows how these people think. And I tell them the truth about what it's like to be controlled by Victor Hale, to have every decision questioned, every relationship scrutinized, every moment of independence punished. Marina, that's what you've been protecting me from, the hard conversations, the public confrontations. But maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. Maybe the board needs to hear from someone who's not trying to take over the company, someone who just wants her father to stop treating people like assets to be managed. Ethan wanted to argue, to protect her from the humiliation of standing up in front of a boardroom full of powerful people and admitting that her family was broken. But he'd promised her, no more protecting her from her own choices. Okay, he said, but we prepare. We figure out exactly what you want to say. We make sure you're ready for whatever Victor throws back. Deal. Now, finish your coffee. Sophie's going to be up soon, and I promised her we'd go to the park before everything goes to hell tomorrow. They spent the day pretending Tuesday didn't exist. They went to the park, where Sophie fed ducks with bread that signs specifically said not to feed them. They got hot chocolate from a cart run by a guy who definitely wasn't following health codes, but made the best cocoa in the city. They walked through neighborhoods where nobody knew about corporate takeovers or custody battles or the price of trying to build something real. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Marina and Ethan sat at the kitchen table with legal pads and rehearsed what she might say. She wrote notes, crossed them out, started over. Ethan watched her struggle with how to put 30 years of complicated feelings into words that wouldn't just sound like whining. I don't know how to do this, she said finally, throwing her pen down. How do I explain what it's like to owe someone for your entire existence? To never be able to separate love from debt? To look at your father and see both the person who saved you and the person who never lets you forget you needed saving? You just did. That's exactly what you say. To a room full of executives who think emotions are weaknesses? Who'll see me crying and think I'm just a girl who can't handle pressure? To a room full of people who have families too, who understand that money and power don't fix everything, who might actually respect someone brave enough to tell the truth. Ethan took her hand. And if they don't? If they side with Victor anyway? At least you'll have said it. At least you won't spend the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if you'd been honest. Marina nodded, but she looked terrified. What if I make it worse? What if standing up to him just makes him angrier? More determined to destroy us? Then he destroys us. But Marina, he's already trying to do that. The custody petition, the injunction, the threats. He's not holding back. So why should we? She picked up her pen again, started writing. This time the words came easier, flowing out in bursts that sounded like anger and grief and relief, all mixed together. Ethan left her to it, went upstairs to check on Sophie, found her awake and staring at the ceiling. Can't sleep? He asked from the doorway. My brain won't turn off. It keeps thinking about tomorrow. You're not supposed to know about tomorrow? I'm 6, not stupid. I know there's a big meeting. I know Grandpa Victor is mad. I know things might change. Sophie sat up, her hair sticking out in directions that defied gravity. Are you scared? Ethan came in, sat on the edge of her bed. Yeah, I'm scared. What are you scared of? Losing. Not being able to protect you and Marina. Letting down the people who trusted me. He smoothed her hair down, watched it spring back up. But being scared doesn't mean we don't try. Sometimes the most important things we do are the things that scare us. Is that why you married Marina? Because it was scary but important? That's exactly why. Sophie considered this with the seriousness of someone trying to understand adult logic. Okay, but Dad, Even if you lose tomorrow, we're still a family, right? That doesn't change? That never changes, no matter what happens in any boardroom or any meeting or anywhere else. We're a family. That's permanent. Promise? I promise. She settled back under her covers, satisfied. Ethan stayed until her breathing evened out, until he was sure she was actually asleep this time. Then he went back downstairs to find Marina still writing, pages and pages of notes that might never get used but seemed to be helping anyway. I think I've got it, she said without looking up. I think I know what to say. You want to practice? No, if I practice, I'll second-guess myself. I'll edit until it sounds corporate instead of real. She set down her pen. I just need to walk in there and say what I feel. Let them see what it's like to be on the other side of Victor's protection. They went to bed early, but neither of them slept well. Ethan kept waking up every hour, checking his phone for messages from James, finding nothing but the slow crawl of time toward morning. Marina tossed and turned beside him, muttering in her sleep about things he couldn't quite make out. At 4:30, he gave up on sleep entirely, showered, made coffee, stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror and tried to see what a board of directors would see. A man who'd outsmarted one of Chicago's most powerful executives? Or just someone who'd gotten lucky and was about to pay for it? Marina found him at 5, already dressed in the suit he'd worn to their wedding. You look terrified. I am terrified. Good. So am I. We can be terrified together. She poured her own coffee, leaned against the counter. Ethan, whatever happens today, I need you to know something. I don't regret marrying you, even if this all falls apart. Even if Victor wins and we lose everything, I'd still choose you. Even though I lied, kept secrets, turned your wedding into a corporate battlefield? Especially because of that. Because it means you were willing to fight for me. Maybe not in the way I would have chosen. Maybe not perfectly, but you fought. And that's more than most people get. They stood in the kitchen drinking coffee and watching dawn break over Chicago like they were preparing for battle. Which, in a way, they were. At 6:30, James called with an update on the injunction. Mixed news. The judge wants to hear arguments this morning before the board meeting, 9 o'clock. If we can convince her the injunction is baseless, you'll be able to vote your shares. If not, he trailed off. If not, I'm just a spectator at my own corporate coup. Basically, I'll meet you at the courthouse. Bring everything, documentation, proof of purchase, character witnesses if you've got them. Character witnesses? James, I'm trying to take over a company, not run for office. You're trying to prove you're not a manipulative fraud. Character witnesses help with that. James paused. Look, I know this isn't how you wanted to spend your first week of marriage, but we're here now. Might as well win. The courthouse was everything Ethan hated about the legal system. Cold fluorescent lighting, uncomfortable benches, the smell of too many people with too many problems all crammed into one building. Victor was already there with his legal team, looking rested and confident in a way that made Ethan's stomach churn. Mr. Vale, Victor nodded like they were acquaintances meeting at a country club. Interesting venue for a reunion. I would have preferred the boardroom, but you forced my hand. I forced your hand? You're the one who filed an injunction. I'm the one protecting my company from a hostile takeover disguised as a love story. Victor smiled. But the judge will see through that. They always do. Marina stepped between them before Ethan could respond. Dad, stop. Just for once, stop playing games and admit what this is really about. You're mad because someone outsmarted you, because Ethan saw your weaknesses and exploited them, and now you're using the legal system to rewrite the rules because you're losing. Victor looked at his daughter with an expression that might have been hurt if Ethan didn't know better. Is that what you think? That I'm doing this out of pride? I think you're doing this because you can't stand losing control. Over the company, over me, over the narrative of who you are and what you've built. All rise, the bailiff called before Victor could respond. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. The hearing took 2 hours. Victor's lawyers argued that Ethan had used privileged information gained through his relationship with Marina to time his stock purchases, that he'd manipulated markets by hiding his ownership, that the whole thing amounted to fraud and should be unwound. James countered with documentation showing every purchase was made with publicly available information. that shell companies and proxies were legal tools used by investors worldwide, that Victor's real concern wasn't legality, but competition. Judge Morrison listened to both sides with the kind of practiced neutrality that came from decades of hearing people lie in creative ways. When the arguments finished, she looked at Ethan over her reading glasses. "Mr. Vale, I've reviewed the evidence, I've read the filings, and I have one question for you." "Yes, Your Honor?" "Did you begin your relationship with Miss Hale, Mrs. Vale, with the intention of gaining access to insider information about Hale Corporation?" The courtroom went silent. Ethan could feel Marina's eyes on him, could feel the weight of how he answered this question. He could lie, could say he'd never thought about the company until months into their relationship, could present himself as someone who'd fallen in love first and made business decisions later. But he'd promised Marina, no more strategic truce, just truth. "No, Your Honor. When I met Marina, I wasn't thinking about Hale Corporation. I was thinking about how she laughed at my terrible jokes and how she treated Sophie like she mattered. But I'd be lying if I said the company didn't factor into my decisions later. I saw how Victor used his wealth to control her, to make her feel dependent, and I thought if I had leverage, I could protect her from that. So yes, the relationship and the business got tangled up, but not because I was using her, because I was trying to build something where we could be equal to the forces trying to tear us apart." Judge Morrison studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at her notes, at the lawyers, at Victor sitting in the front row with his jaw clenched tight. "I'm denying the injunction," she said finally. "Mr. Vale's stock purchases appear to be legal, documented, and within the bounds of normal market behavior. If Mr. Hale believes there was fraud, he can pursue that through proper channels. But I'm not going to block a shareholder from exercising their legal rights based on speculation about motives." She banged her gavel. "The injunction is dismissed. We're adjourned." Victor was out of his seat before the bailiff finished announcing the judge's exit. He stormed past Ethan and Marina without a word, his lawyers scrambling after him like they were fleeing a fire. "That went better than expected," James said, gathering his files. "You ready for round two?" Ethan looked at Marina, who nodded. "Ready as we'll ever be." The board meeting was scheduled for 1 o'clock at Hale Corporation headquarters. They had 3 hours to prepare, to rehearse, to convince themselves they could actually pull this off. They spent it in a conference room James had rented, going over the presentation one more time, making sure every number was right, every argument solid. At 12:30, Marina excused herself to the bathroom. When she came back, her eyes were red, but her jaw was set. "You okay?" Ethan asked. "I called my mother, my real mother, the one Victor paid off to disappear." Marina's voice shook slightly. "I told her what was happening, what I was about to do. And you know what she said?" "What?" "She said she was proud of me, that standing up to Victor was the bravest thing anyone in our family had ever done, that she wished she'd been strong enough to do it herself." Marina wiped at her eyes. 30 years. 30 years of thinking she didn't want me, that Victor had saved me from her, and she's been waiting all this time for me to realize the truth. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to respond to the kind of pain that came from 3 decades of manufactured abandonment. So he just held her while she cried, while she let herself feel all the things she'd been holding back. At 12:55, they walked into Hale Corporation headquarters, the building Victor had used as a symbol of his power, the empire Ethan now partly owned, the battlefield where this would all be decided. The boardroom was on the 43rd floor, all glass and chrome and views that cost more than most people would make in a lifetime. 12 board members were already seated, Victor at the head of the table, Richard and Thomas on either side. Caroline Weston 3 seats down, looking at Ethan with something that might have been encouragement. "Mr. Vale, Mrs. Vale, how kind of you to join us." Victor's voice dripped sarcasm. "Please, have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." Ethan pulled out a chair for Marina, then sat beside her. James took a position behind them with his laptop ready. Across the table, Gerald Moss watched like a hawk studying prey. "Let's begin," Victor said. "We're here today to discuss some concerning developments regarding stock ownership in this company. Specifically, the revelation that Ethan Vale, through a series of shell companies and questionable tactics, has acquired a significant minority position. I've called this meeting to determine how we should respond to what I believe is a hostile takeover attempt. Caroline Weston raised her hand. Point of order. If Mr. Vale owns 42% of outstanding shares, as has been reported, shouldn't he be chairing this meeting? Or at least co-chairing with you? Victor's face went red. This meeting was called to address his ownership, not to validate it. But the ownership is legal, correct? Judge Morrison just ruled on that this morning. Caroline looked around the table. Unless there's evidence of actual fraud, Mr. Vale has every right to participate in this meeting as a major shareholder. In fact, I'd argue he has an obligation to participate. Other board members murmured agreement. Victor looked at Gerald, who shrugged helplessly. Fine, Victor said through clenched teeth. Mr. Vale, would you like to address the board? Explain your intentions for this company? Ethan stood up, suddenly aware that every eye in the room was on him, that this moment would define everything that came after, that he could either prove he belonged here or prove Victor right about him being an opportunist. I didn't buy shares in Hale Corporation to take it over, he began. I bought them because I was trying to protect someone I love from a man who uses power as a weapon. Victor Hale is an exceptional businessman. Everyone in this room knows that. But he's also someone who can't separate business from control, who treats relationships like transactions, who genuinely believes that money gives him the right to manage other people's lives. This is absurd, Victor interrupted. I'm not on trial here. Aren't you? Ethan kept his voice level. Because from where I'm standing, this meeting is about whether one man should have unchecked power over a company that employs thousands of people. Whether someone who's proven he'll use that power to manipulate personal relationships should continue making decisions that affect all of you. I built this company, Victor said, from nothing. I made every one of you wealthy. And this is how you repay me? By listening to accusations from a man who's been lying to you since day one? I haven't lied to anyone. I bought stock, legally, same as any investor. The only difference is I was smart enough to hide what I was doing until it mattered. Ethan pulled up the first slide of his presentation. What I'm proposing isn't a takeover. It's a restructuring, new leadership at the top, fresh perspectives on the board, an end to the culture of intimidation that's been driving talented people away for years. He went through the next 20 slides methodically, showing employee retention rates that had been declining, projects that had failed because Victor micromanaged them to death, opportunities missed because the company was too focused on maintaining Victor's control to actually innovate. When he finished, the board sat in silence. Then Caroline spoke up again. I think what Mr. Vale is proposing makes sense, not because Victor has been a bad CEO, but because every company benefits from change, from new leadership, from admitting that one person, no matter how talented, can't run a modern corporation alone. She looked at Victor. You've had a good run, an incredible run, but maybe it's time to step back. Let others carry the weight for a while. You're voting against me? Victor looked genuinely shocked. Caroline, we've worked together for 15 years. I made you a board member. You made me a board member because I was useful, because I brought connections and capital, but you never actually listened to me, to any of us. You made decisions and we rubber-stamped them. That's not governance. That's just autocracy with better furniture. Other board members were nodding now. David Park, Sarah Mitchell. Two others that Ethan didn't recognize, but whose body language suggested they were sympathetic. The tide was shifting, and Victor could feel it. This is a coup, he said flatly, orchestrated by a man who married my daughter to get leverage on this company. Marina stood up. Ethan hadn't expected this, hadn't planned for it, but she stood and all eyes turned to her. I'm not a board member, she said quietly. I don't have voting rights. I'm just Victor Hale's daughter. The poor girl he rescued from poverty and raised into high society, the charity case who should be grateful for everything he's given her. She paused. That's the story he tells, the one he's been telling for 30 years. And I believed it. I believed I owed him my life, my loyalty, my complete submission to his version of what my future should look like. Marina, don't do this, Victor said. Not here. Not like this. Why not? You did this to me in public, at restaurants, at galas, at my own wedding. You've spent years reminding me in front of other people that I came from nothing, that I should be grateful, that I should never forget who saved me. Her voice cracked. Well, I haven't forgotten, but I've also remembered something else. I was 7 years old when you took me in. 7. I didn't ask to be saved. I didn't ask to spend the next 3 decades owing you for the crime of being born poor. The room had gone completely silent. Even Gerald Moss had stopped taking notes. You want to know why Ethan bought shares in your company? Marina continued. It's because he saw what you've been doing to me. The control, the manipulation, the constant reminders that everything I am is because of you. And he thought if he had power, he could protect me from that. Was he wrong to keep it secret? Yes. Should he have told me from the start? Absolutely. But Dad, at least he was trying to give me freedom. You've spent 30 years trying to take it away. Victor looked at his daughter like he was seeing her for the first time. Everything I did was to protect you. No. Everything you did was to control me. There's a difference. Protection means teaching someone to protect themselves. Control means making sure they never can. Marina sat back down, her hands shaking. So when this board votes today, remember that. Remember that the man you're voting for has proven he can't tell the difference between protecting people and owning them. Victor stood up slowly. For a moment, Ethan thought he might explode, might rage against the betrayal, might threaten and manipulate and fight until the very end. Instead, he just looked tired. I see, he said quietly. I've lost. Not just this vote. Everything. My daughter. My company. My legacy. He turned to Ethan. Congratulations. You've won. I hope it was worth it. This wasn't about winning, Ethan said. Everything is about winning. That's the lesson you still need to learn. Victor gathered his papers with shaking hands. I'll make this easy for you. I resign. Effective immediately. You can have the company. You can have your restructuring. You can have whatever vision you think is better than mine. Dad, Marina started. No. You made your choice. You both did. And I have to live with that. Victor walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, Marina, I do love you. I always have. I just never learned how to show it without strings attached. That's on me, not you. He left before anyone could respond. The board sat in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. Then Caroline cleared her throat. Well, I suppose we need to discuss interim leadership and a search for a new CEO, unless Mr. Vale would like to nominate himself? No, Ethan said immediately. I don't want to run Hale Corporation. I just wanted to make sure someone else could, someone who'd do it right. For the employees, for the stakeholders, for everyone who isn't Victor Hale. They spent the next hour hashing out details. Caroline was nominated as interim CEO. A search committee was formed. Ethan's shares were officially recognized and recorded. The coup that had started in a restaurant 2 weeks ago ended in a conference room with paperwork and handshakes and the strange anticlimax of actually winning. When they finally left the building, the sun was setting over Chicago. Marina leaned against Ethan in the elevator, exhausted. Did that really just happen? She asked. I think so. I'm still processing. My father resigned, just walked away. I never thought he'd actually do that. Neither did I. Ethan pulled her closer. You okay? Ask me in a year, or 10 years, or never. She looked up at him. But Ethan, thank you for fighting for me, for us, even when you did it badly, even when you kept secrets and made terrible choices. Thank you for caring enough to try. They picked up Sophie from Mrs. Chen's, drove home through traffic that felt different now. Lighter, somehow. Like the weight they'd been carrying had finally been set down. Sophie chattered about her day, oblivious to the corporate warfare that had been raging while she learned about dinosaurs and practiced her spelling words. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ethan and Marina sat on their back porch with wine that was probably too expensive for a Tuesday, but felt appropriate anyway. What happens now? Marina asked. We figure out how to be married, how to be a family, how to build something that's actually ours instead of something defined by fighting Victor. Sounds hard. Probably impossible. Ethan took her hand. But we're good at impossible. We made it this far. Did we make it? Or did we just survive? Both. Making it and surviving are the same thing. You just keep going until one day you realize you're not just fighting anymore. You're living. Marina rested her head on his shoulder. I'm still mad at you, for the secrets, for handling this the way you did. I know. But I'm also proud of you for standing up to him, for not backing down even when it would have been easier. Does this mean I'm forgiven? It means you're on probation, long-term probation, with performance reviews and check-ins and a lot of conversations about honesty and partnership. She smiled against his shoulder. Think you can handle that? I can handle anything as long as you're handling it with me. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Chicago's lights spread out below them. Somewhere in this city, Victor was probably drinking expensive whiskey and planning his next move. Somewhere, lawyers were drawing up paperwork. Somewhere, the machinery of corporate restructuring was grinding forward. But here, on this porch, Ethan let himself just be. A husband, a father, a man who'd fought a war and wasn't entirely sure he'd won, but was grateful to have survived it. 3 months later, Marina's mother visited from Seattle, the woman who'd been paid to disappear, who'd spent 30 years believing she'd done the right thing by letting Victor raise her daughter in a world she couldn't provide. They sat in Ethan's living room drinking tea that nobody touched while Sophie played upstairs, and for the first time in 3 decades, mother and daughter tried to figure out who they were to each other. "I'm sorry," her mother said for the 10th time. "I thought he'd give you a better life. I thought I was doing what was best." "You thought wrong," Marina said, but her voice was gentle. "But I get it. When someone with money and power tells you they can fix everything, it's hard not to believe them." 6 months after the board meeting, Victor called, not to threaten or manipulate or try to win back control, just to ask if he could take Sophie to the zoo. The conversation was awkward, full of pauses and careful words, but Ethan said yes, because holding grudges was exhausting, and Sophie deserved to know her grandfather without the weight of corporate warfare attached. Victor picked her up on a Saturday morning, looking older than Ethan remembered. Less certain, more human. "I'll have her back by 5, Victor said. "Take your time. Just feed her lunch. She gets cranky when she's hungry." I remember. Marina was the same way at that age. Victor hesitated. "For what it's worth, you were right. About the control. About treating people like assets. I've had a lot of time to think about that. About what I lost by holding on too tight." "What are you going to do now?" "I don't know. Maybe consulting. Maybe just retirement. Maybe I'll figure out how to be a person instead of a CEO. Victor managed a small smile. "Turns out, it's harder than it looks." "Yeah, it is." Ethan watched Sophie run to Victor's car, excited about the zoo trip. "But you've got time, and people who might be willing to help. If you can learn to accept help without turning it into debt." Victor nodded slowly. "I'll work on that." A year after the wedding, Ethan and Marina bought a house, not in the neighborhood where Victor had raised her, not in the world of old money and older grudges. They found a place in a different part of Chicago, where the houses had history but not pretension, where neighbors knew each other's names but didn't know their net worth. They renovated it themselves, mostly. Well, they hired contractors. But they made decisions together, argued about paint colors and floor plans, and whether the kitchen really needed that much marble. They built something that was theirs, chosen and paid for, and argued over until it felt like home. Sophie started 3rd grade that fall. She had friends who came over for sleepovers, teachers who didn't know about corporate coups or custody battles, a normal life that felt almost miraculous in its ordinariness. Marina went back to school, started working on a degree in social work. She wanted to help kids like she'd been, she said. Kids caught between poverty and people who thought money solved everything. It was hard work, emotionally draining, but she attacked it with the same fierce determination she'd shown standing up to her father in that boardroom. Ethan rebuilt his investment firm, this time without hiding anything. He was open about his ownership in Hale Corporation, about his history with Victor, about everything that had led him here. Some clients walked away. Others stayed. New ones appeared who appreciated the transparency. Caroline Weston turned out to be an excellent CEO. Under her leadership, Hale Corporation reorganized, brought in fresh talent, stopped bleeding employees who were tired of toxic culture. The company thrived in ways it hadn't under Victor's iron grip. Ethan attended board meetings quarterly, voted on major decisions, and otherwise stayed out of the way. On their 2nd anniversary, Marina and Ethan went back to Aurelius, the restaurant where Victor had slid that prenup across the table and started this whole mess. They got the same corner table, the same waiter, the same overpriced wine. 2 years, Marina said, raising her glass. We made it 2 years without killing each other or getting divorced or destroying our lives. The bar is low, but we cleared it. Ethan clinked his glass against hers. Here's to 2 more years. And then 2 more after that. And just keep going until we run out of years. That's morbid. That's realistic. We're not a fairy tale. We're just 2 people who chose each other and keep choosing each other even when it's hard. Marina smiled. I like that better than happily ever after anyway, because happily ever after sounds boring. Like once you get married, everything's perfect and easy. But this, us, it's messy and complicated, and we still fight about stupid things like whose turn it is to take out the trash. It's your turn. It's definitely your turn. They argued good-naturedly through dinner about trash duties and whether Sophie needed a dog, and if Marina's mother should move to Chicago or if that would be too much family in one city. They argued like people who knew they'd wake up tomorrow still together, still trying, still building something that didn't come with guarantees but felt real anyway. Walking back to their car, Marina stopped suddenly. You know what I just realized? What? We're happy. Not perfectly happy. Not without problems or stress or things we're worried about, but happy. When did that happen? Ethan thought about it, about board meetings and custody battles and all the ways this could have gone wrong, about the choice to fight instead of surrender, about Marina's voice in that conference room, finally saying all the things she'd been holding back for 30 years. I think it happened slowly, he said. So slowly we didn't notice. We were too busy fighting and surviving and trying to protect each other. But somewhere in there, while we weren't paying attention, we built a life. And the life turned out to be pretty good. Pretty good, Marina repeated. I'll take it. They drove home to the house they'd chosen, to the daughter who was probably still awake reading under her covers with a flashlight, to the life they'd fought for and won. Not because they were perfect, but because they refused to give up. And if that wasn't happily ever after, it was something better. It was real. Earned. Chosen every day by 2 people who'd learned that love wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about making mistakes and choosing each other anyway. About building something together that was stronger than the sum of its broken parts. About being brave enough to fight for the life you want instead of accepting the one other people think you deserve. In the end, that was the only victory that mattered.